Without further ado, let's get this started. So we're going to start with the very first pull in Spiderwing, or in Plague Wing, and we're going to go through every single pull, and we're going to talk about it. All right. So yes, all right, let's get this out of the way now. My UI definitely used to fucking suck. Okay, I know it was terrible. You can tell me it's terrible. I'm aware of the fact that it was terrible. No need to remind me it was terrible. It was terrible. And because everybody's gonna fucking ask, when you look at these binds down here, no, my actual binds were not F1 through F12. I used actual binds on like my secondary keys. I was just OCD about that shit, and I like the symmetry of having the 1 through 12 and the 1 through whatever. So, no, I was not clicking all my shit, I promise. But yes, obviously my UI has improved over time. I will definitely say that. And in case you're wondering, yes, this character was in fact rocking Empyrean Demolisher and Anubis Death Warhammer. On this retail server, ED at the time had a 1.5 ppm, so it was very close to the best weapon in the game. Who is this? Poggy, yeah, Poggy. Okay, so here we go. So, first pull of the Plague Wing is going to be 3 Infectious Ghouls. For those wondering, by the way, this is the trash right here that you're going to be able to solo farm. You're going to be able to kite these guys. So you're going to be capable of farming the Naxx trash here off of these guys, but that's something for now that obviously we don't really care about when doing this review right here. So, Plague Wing trash, first of all, there's not much of it. Most of the trash occurs before the first boss, and after that there's almost nothing between the first and last boss. Plague Wing trash is, for the most part, going to be a joke. This is really not something you're going to worry about. I'm going to tell you every single mechanic that these guys have right here, but at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be concerned about any of them. So, first things you're going to start with is 3 Infectious Ghouls. These ghouls right here are actually somewhat similar to the ghouls like you would encounter in Strat UD, in that they hit relatively hard, and they'll enrage, or they're going to frenzy at low health and start hitting like fucking trucks. So, they do have a couple of mechanics that I should at least mention, even if, frankly, they're not going to be all that relevant over time. They're going to do a single target rend debuff, so they're going to put a rend on whatever target they're attacking, so it's going to be one of the tanks. The rend is a fucking absolute joke. It ticks for 97 damage on the PTR for like every 1 second, I think, so you literally, it's just a mechanic you can straight up ignore. But yeah, better bring your loofah, otherwise you're going to get wrecked. Oh. And then they do a more notable single target debuff called Flesh Rot, which it's a physical disease, or well, is it technically classified as a disease? Hold on, let me confirm this so I don't tell you the wrong thing. I'm 99% sure it's actually a physical debuff, even though it sounds like it should be a disease. Okay, yes, it is a physical debuff, so technically, I guess it's a bleed, so you can technically use your loofah to dispel it, but once again, not all that relevant. It'll inflict periodically like 555 to 645 damage. Chances are to your main tank every 2 seconds for 12 seconds. So, as long as your healers aren't completely fucking asleep at the wheel, then this is just another kind of irrelevant mechanic that they have that can be easily healed through. And then the last thing to worry about is that they do Frenzy. That I would say is the most dangerous part of the ghouls. Similar to like the ghouls, like I said, in Strat UD. These guys are going to start going berserk, or they're going to turn like bright red. Like this guy does right here. Which means they're going to start hitting significantly harder. They're going to start attacking faster and hit harder. When they frenzy like this, they are actually pretty damn dangerous. If you're a DPS warrior, and you rip thread on these guys when they're frenzied, you can actually very easily get like murked to the point where you definitely really don't want to rip thread off these guys. If you do rip thread and they are frenzied, it's probably a good time for a lip, because otherwise this would be a very easy way to lose your buffs at the start of the run. So as long as you're not a complete fucking gorilla, this is not so bad. Because otherwise, for the most part, all you get to do is just stand here and cleave your balls off and just get to see big numbers as you go ham on the ghouls. The only dangerous part, like I said, is the frenzy. Everything else about these guys is mostly a joke. Alright. Second thing. I got so much like echo in this room when I don't have my green screen. It's so weird. Can you guys hear that? I know I can. Odd. Anyways. Next thing up is going to be the Plague Slimes. Plague Slimes, they have a grand total of 1 mechanic. And it's like a kind of hilarious joke of a mechanic. The only gimmick of Plague Slimes is that you're going to see them change colors as you're fighting them. So you can see like one of the Plague Slimes started as red, he changed colors to blue. All you have to care about when you're fighting these Plague Slimes right here is that whenever they change color, their color is associated with an immunity to a certain school of magic. So, for example, when a Plague Slime is red, that means that it's going to be immune to fire damage. If a Plague Slime is black, it's going to be immune to shadow damage. If it's blue, it's immune to frost damage. And if it's green, it's immune to nature damage. The only really notable, so like, if you're a melee, you don't give a flying fuck about that, obviously. If you're a caster, like, oh, if it turns red, then you're a fire mage, like, ah, shit, I gotta switch to Frostbolt or something, whatever. The only thing you really have to worry about these Plague Slimes is that they do hit fairly hard. Not so hard to the point that they're untankable, but it's probably not advisable to tank these more than you have to. And the reason I say that is because they move extremely slowly. It's a little bit hard to tell from this video right here. Well, actually, you can tell. Okay, you can see them coming in right here. You can see this is their normal move speed right here. They don't move any faster than this. So because of that, you can very easily just have like a hunter distracting shot spam onto Plague Slimes and just kite them everywhere. That's the traditional strat to fight these Plague Slimes. In that a hunter can distracting shot, and as they just like very slowly chase the hunter, or really anybody who has aggro. Like anybody who has aggro can just start kiting them. The rest of the DPS start killing them as you're kiting them along. In reality, on the PTR, based on how much damage they're doing, if you want your main tank to just sit there and tank it, you can do it. You're gonna have the healers like focus the main tank for sure, but it's not unreasonable to have these be tanked. So if you really want to like stack these up and cleave them down, you can absolutely do it. Like these were not designed to be tanked. They were obviously designed to be kited, but in reality, in 2020, you can just tank them. You'll be fine. So generally speaking, when you pull these ghouls, the Plague Slimes do come with them. As you can kind of see in this video, and what will be the same on live, you're probably going to kill the ghouls before the slimes reach you. So you just focus the ghouls first, and then the slimes. Really not much else to say here on these guys, because they're, once again, kind of a joke. Okay. And then we have mob type number 3, the Stone Skin Gargoyle. If there's any trash I guess you have to be kind of careful with in the Plague Wing, it's going to be these guys. Stone Skin Gargoyles. One of them is not dangerous. 2 of them is not really dangerous. The only dangerous part about doing Stone Skin Gargoyles is doing them back to back to back to back to back to back without stopping. So if you're trying to go as fast as possible, they can get dangerous. I'll get to why here in a second. First things first. There's going to be a couple of Stone Skin Gargoyle patrols. So like you can see, this one came in here. You couldn't see where, but it was patrolling through like the little room we're about to run through right here. And so you're going to pick up one of these after the first pull here of ghouls, and you'll pick up one a little bit later after the... So okay, here's the cadence you're going to go in here in Plague Wing. You're going to do a pull of 3 infectious ghouls plus 2 Plague Slimes. And then you're going to do a patrol of a Stone Skin Gargoyle right here. And then you're going to do another pack of 3 infectious ghouls and 2 Plague Slimes together. And then it'll be another Stone Skin Gargoyle pat, and then 3 sets of 2 Stone Skin Gargoyles. If you're not following that, just keep watching. You'll see the order in which you go through. But this will be the first one you fight. So the only really mechanic you're going to have to worry about on the Stone Skin Gargoyles is their acid volley. You're not going to see this guy cast it for whatever reason. But the second one we fight, we will. So I'll talk about it then. But anyways, as far as the next pull is concerned, there's really not much else to talk about as far as these infectious ghouls are concerned. Here's the second gargoyle, by the way. The ghouls, the slimes are the exact same. Just nuke them down. Exact same mechanics as the first pull. You cannot stun lock the gargoyles. No, they are not CCable in any way. ED uptime's insane. Well, that's the difference between 1 ppm and 1.5 ppm. The difference is actually pretty notable. Damn, we actually never got an acid volley in that one either. Okay, we'll wait till the real pull, I guess. So you can see, like I said, while these slimes are designed to be kited, you can just stack them up here and cleave them down, which is exactly what we did here. This is what Classic's gonna look like, so I'm okay with showing you the sort of like guerrilla way of doing these packs because pretty much anybody is going to be able to do these this way as well. Okay, so this right here is the section, like, you're going to go down the staircase right here, down this little tunnel thing, whatever you want to call it. The bottom of this tunnel will lead to Noth, the first boss. So you're going to have to deal with 3 pairs of gargoyles, the exact same stone skin gargoyle mobs again. They're going to start as, like, basically what looks like statues, so you can see, like, they're just sitting here. They're just sitting right here. They look like they're statues. So, like, if a person's never done Naxx before, you might think, like, oh, cool, there's just, like, cool decorations in Naxx. Like, no, they're going to turn into, like, actual mobs. And they're basically going to be two of the versions of the mobs we just fought. So, the thing you're going to have to worry about here is the acid volley that's going to stack up onto the raid. Come on, cast it. Thank you. Jesus, that took a while. Okay, so these are going to be AoE poison bolts that hit the entire raid, no matter what. These poison bolts are a stackable dot that's going to go onto you. So, like, getting 2 stacks is not scary. Each stack of this dot right here is going to tick for 130 to 150 damage. Not that much on its own. The danger becomes if it takes you too long to kill these gargoyles, or perhaps more notably, if you go straight into the next pair of gargoyles without letting these stacks drop first, then you can eventually start building enough stacks to the point where it can be scary and you can be in danger of dying. So realistically, you probably don't want to build more than about 10 stacks of the acid. Once you're at 10 stacks of the acid, it's going to be ticking every 2 seconds for 1,300 to 1,500 damage on the entire raid. And that's going to start putting you into the danger zone after a while. So generally speaking, what you're going to want to do here, if you're just doing a regular ass run, is you do the 2 stone skin gargoyles here, you kill them, and then you wait until your debuff drops, and then you do the next pull. Elixir or poison resist will not work. You can see it as a physical debuff. It's like they look like poison volley bolts, but they're not like actual poison classifications. They're just a physical debuff that cannot be removed. Roughly how much health do these gargoyles have? I don't know the exact number, but it's not a ton. I mean, like, you can just kind of get a gauge of how much they have just by how fast we kill them here. Lip will not remove it, no. Okay, so keep in mind, these poison bull volleys are AoE, so they hit everybody. They are not LOSable. It is not dispellable. It is not in any way conventionally removable. So the idea behind these mobs is you want to kill them fast enough to the point where you kill them before you get enough stacks to make it dangerous. The only other mechanic these guys have, and obviously they're going to auto attack the tanks, but they hit the tanks for like peanuts. You don't, as long as your healer is just doing standard healing on top of the tank, it's not a big deal. The only other mechanic you're gonna have to worry about is these guys are gonna cast an ability called Stone Skin when they get low on health. On the PTR, they begin casting Stone Skin at 35%. So when they start casting Stone Skin, it's gonna be a 6-second channeled, or a 6-second cast time on a spell. And you're gonna notice like they're gonna emote in the chat saying like the gargoyle emits a strange noise. And all that means is after that 6-second cast time, if they've not been killed, they will go into stone form and regenerate all their health and go back to full health again. So no guild in the entire world is going to struggle with this mechanic. You can, by the time they get below 35%, 6 seconds is a fucking eternity and you will kill them. But in a world where somehow you don't manage to kill the gargoyles within 6 seconds after they're below 35%, they will regen back to full health. And I mean, in theory, the scary part about that was, you know, they would start refreshing your stacks of poison, of the acid right here, and to the point where you might eventually die. I struggle to think even the worst guilds out there are going to struggle with these guys. I can't imagine anybody's really going to find these difficult, so it's not really something you should worry about. Like I said, the only thing you should worry about is making sure you don't pull too quickly again before these debuffs drop, just because if you do take too many, it starts to get a little bit scary. Okay, so you can see another pair right here. In reality, if you're like a pumper guild, you can absolutely just do a couple of these pulls back to back, or if you're really pumping hard enough, you can just do all 3 of these pulls back to back to back and not take enough stacks to realistically get into danger. But unless you're like speedrunning, there's not really any point to chain pulling these if you're trying to play it a little bit safe. On PTR that had 264k health, yeah, that sounds about right. Not a ton. And you can stack these guys up, by the way. There's no reason why these need to be separated. I don't know why they're separated here, but you can absolutely just cleave these guys down. They have no cleave mechanic. They have no AoE damage mechanic outside of the poison volley, so there's no downside to stacking them up. Okay. And now we're at Noth. Outside of the gauntlet we'll do after Noth, that's really all the notable trash in the Plague Wing. There's a little bit more, technically, but there's not much more. Okay, so Noth is a boss where most guilds are not going to see a large portion of his mechanics and a large portion of the fight. Hey, what's up, The Tick, coming in hot with the tier 1 sub. Appreciate it, dude. Sup. Your sub will go directly to the Hot Pockets and Doritos Fund. Much appreciated, dude. So Noth is a fight where, in theory, he has like a phase 1 and a phase 2, or 2 different phases, I guess. You might only end up seeing one of them. For some guilds, you'll see one of the second phases, but Onslaught, for example, I don't think we'll probably ever see a phase 2. So Noth is the only cleave fight in the entirety of Naxx, believe it or not. Noth is the only fight where you're really going to have to deal with adds as you're also fighting the boss. So like as a melee, for example, it's actually going to be kind of fun in that like you get to press your cleave and Whirlwind buttons, get to see a bunch of numbers. But we'll get to this in a sec. All right. So we're going to watch this POV first. Actually, you know what? Now let's watch the real POV. Let's watch the more like traditional POV first. Because admittedly, what you're gonna watch when we watch this version, you're gonna see what you're actually gonna see in Classic. Like for most guilds, is what you're gonna watch here. But let's watch the more traditional one first, just to give you an idea of what the fight, I guess, is supposed to look like. Let's do a throwback right here, shall we? This one is legitimately back from retail vanilla. Curse versus Noth and vanilla. Curse gaming, they were so badass. Wow. All right, so the fucking throwback footage right here. Vesuvius better not be a fucking cleave fight. Okay, so damn, you can see they wiped quite a few times here. Holy shit. So, you know what? Before we actually watch this video, this will be the one we watch to watch the room mechanics. So let's watch the start of this attempt right here, just so I can talk about the mechanics, because it's a bit easier to see stuff in this POV compared to the other one. So let's talk about the mechanics he has like in the first phase of the fight. So you're gonna pull Noth, pick him up, cool. The first 10 or 15 seconds or so of this fight is literally just tank and spank. All right, here's the first one. You can see you got I and the rest of the entire raid here, or well, a large portion of the raid has a curse, like about half the raid or so. In fact, that's right. It only goes on to like basically people in melee range. If you're a caster, like as long as you're attacking from range, you're not going to get this curse. So it's just going to occur to people that are within the melee range of the boss. So when this curse goes out, it's called Curse of the Plaguebringer. This is going to require your mages and your druids to decurse as soon as possible. This is one of the the few times in the few fights in the game where you can like tell the mages like, okay, I guess we might actually need you for this fight. Like, all right, we might actually need some druids for this fight. It is an absolute priority that when this curse goes out, you decurse it as soon as possible. You realistically don't want to have literally anybody have the duration of this curse tick to 0. If this curse reaches 0 on anybody, what it's going to do is it's going to turn into a spell called the Wrath of the Plaguebringer. If you get Wrath of the Plaguebringer, you're going to do AoE shadow damage to everybody around you. I think it's something like 12 to 1500 every second. And you will not only do that, but then you will also spread that same debuff to other people around you as well. So basically what that means is that even if you get like even one person that doesn't get dispelled, you might be able to get away with one, but if you get like 2 or more people that don't get dispelled and this curse goes off, it's basically a guaranteed death for every single person in melee range, and it's basically a guaranteed wipe. So it's not a tough mechanic. Just make sure you decurse. You get 10 seconds to do it. I'd like to think that the mages and the druids can press their decurse button in time to decurse everybody. As long as you know how to press your decurse button, this is a non-issue as far as the mechanic's concerned. Duckcloth says, no way you're pumping. Well, it's going to happen in some guilds where the mage is like, I'm not going to decurse. The rest of them are going to decurse, and it's going to kill all the melee, and they'll never make that mistake ever again. But in theory, this is not a difficult mechanic. Yes, technically you could use a resto pot to dispel the curse, but it's only going to be effective for 30 seconds. Unless you can tell me you're going to nuke down Noth in 30 seconds, which some guilds might be able to, or at least come close to, maybe eventually. I wouldn't necessarily recommend just relying on nothing but a resto pot. But, I mean, if it's like an emergency situation, you're realizing like, oh shit, like all of our mages died or something, and like we're about to take the curse, then yeah, you can pop a resto pot to at least mitigate it a couple of times. Do we know the frequency of the curse? I can check actually, hold on. Okay, yeah, it looks like the frequency of the curse, it happens about every minute or so. So it doesn't happen super often. So because of that, you can get away with the first round of curses, you can get away with just like using a resto pot if you want to. And then at that point, like if you can kill Noth within about, yeah, a minute, which is doable, then you're not gonna have to worry about the second one. Why is there only 42 minutes left in the flask? Because this was not the first wing we did in this run. Okay, so what if your comp is melee heavy? It'll make it harder. It's not impossible or anything, but it's going to make it harder the more melee you have just for the decurse. I mean, like mathematically speaking, you can kind of do the math on how long it's going to take the decurse based on how many melee you have. Let's say if you have 3 mages and a druid, that means you have 4 decurses every 1.5 seconds, which means that over the course of until the curse ticks down, it's like you have 10 seconds to do it. You can get in what? About 6 rounds of decursing, so 24 decurses. So even in a raid where you only have 4 decursers, in theory, you can still decurse a comp of like 24 melee. So can you, you have to run at least like 10 decursers in this raid, and you can only run like 10 melee, no more. Like, no, you have plenty of time to decurse, but yes, it does require your decursers to be a bit more on the ball the more melee you have. Okay, so you're going to see everybody here gets decursed. Cool, awesome. We're not going to wipe to this. That's good news. All right, now, the next thing notable about the Noth fight is he does, in fact, spawn adds. He's going to spawn, during his little initial phase right here, these plagued warriors, which are basically just like skeleton warriors, whatever the fuck you want to call them. And he's going to spawn 4 of them. Like, each wave is going to have 4 of these plagued warriors. Is it 4 or 3? I know in like the teleport phase he definitely has 4, but let me confirm this for sure before I tell you something wrong. Okay, never mind. It's 3. Okay, he spawns 3. I'm thinking of the phase 2 after the teleport. So he's gonna spawn these ads periodically throughout his little like phase 1, if you want to call it that. And these guys are mostly a joke. You're really just not gonna have to worry about them all that much. All you're gonna really have to do is just stack them on top of the boss, and you can start meleeing, or you can start cleaving and warwinding your balls off. Good time to pop your holy water as well. What's the best order to do all the wings? There's no necessarily guaranteed best order. Frankly, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. It doesn't make a difference. You have to do them all individually anyways. So there are technically mechanics that these Plagued Warriors have that I'll go over, even if they're not all that notable, to be honest. Plagued Warriors, you'll probably want to have like your off tanks pick these guys up. They hit hard enough to the point where you don't really want to just face tank at them if you can avoid them. They're like, for example, they're going to hit tanks for in the neighborhood of like 1 to 1.5k per melee attack. So certainly nothing Chain Heal can't take care of, but not something you ideally want to eat just as a DPS warrior if you can avoid it. They do also cleave and heroic strike, so if they're just attacking their single target, they're going to heroic strike them sometimes, and they're also going to cleave. So if you are off tanking these guys, ideally you want to face them in a direction that faces away from the DPS, and if you're a ranged DPS, like a caster or something, you don't really want to stack directly on top of these guys, because you can get cleaved, and you might get wrecked because of that. So you can stack them, it's fine, just like face them in the proper direction away from the raid, and just make sure that you're not standing and eating a cleave as a melee DPSer. And yes, there will be a VOD of these guys right here for sure. You need one tank for each adder. Can you tank multiple? You can probably tank multiple, as in you can take enough damage to tank multiple, though I would say that it might be difficult to hold threat on both, just because you would assume the melee are going to be cleaving and whirlwinding with reckless abandon to the point where trying to do enough threat on 2 of these guys might be a little tricky. But really, I mean, frankly, you can even have like a tank just pick these guys up and probably just tank them in Zerker stance if you really want to, as long as the healers know to focus them. I'm not gonna say every guild can do that, but like we'll probably do something like that. We'll kind of treat them like Sulfuron or Luciferon ads. But the chances are you're gonna want to at least have somebody dedicated to picking these guys up, so that way the healers know who to focus when these guys do spawn. Okay. But as you can see, anyways, they're getting blasted down. So as a melee, you get to mash your cleave button. As a caster, it's tempting to AoE here, but depending on how long your Noth takes, I would be careful here. Just like as a mage, like it's going to be tempting to spam Arcane Explosion, Blast Wave, or Flame Strike, or whatever. But this fight will be, you're going to get enough of these spawns right here to the point where if you're just spamming AoE spells, you're probably just going to yourself really quickly. So as a mage, you can probably get away with doing something like, you can toss a Holy Water, you can probably get away with a Blast Wave, maybe a Flame Strike, but I wouldn't just spam AoE spells every time the skeletons spawn, or you probably will be by the end of the fight. Or, well, before the end of the fight. Okay. Alright, that's the next mechanic right here. Noth periodically throughout the fight, it's about every 25 to 30 seconds or so, is going to blink. So when he blinks, it's pretty self-explanatory. He's going to blink, just like the mage spell would. He's going to blink in some random direction and teleport to a new spot. Right here, okay? He doesn't go far. It's not like he goes across the entire fucking room. He only goes like 15 yards or so. But when he blinks, 2 things are going to happen. Number 1, he does a complete aggro reset. His aggro table completely resets, disappears, and starts fresh. So when that happens, you want to make sure that as like a caster, like as a ranged DPS, because you'll still be in range of him, chances are, when the blink occurs. It means that you don't want you're gonna want to stop pressing your buttons for a little bit, because especially if you're a mage, you got the fatty fucking ignite rolling on Noth. If you've got the fatty ignite rolling on Noth and he blinks and you keep casting the entire time and you keep rolling that ignite, you're going to generate a shit ton of threat all of a sudden, to the point where he's probably just going to run over to you and murk you. Fresh? Fresh aggro table? Fresh? Wow. So as a ranged DPS, when you see the blink happen, you got to stop DPS and wait for the tank to pick it up, which is a little bit more complicated than it might seem, because of the fact that he does something else when he blinks as well, and which is a cripple. So you can see the debuff right here. Anybody who's in melee range of Noth, when he blinks, is going to receive this cripple debuff, and it's a pretty standard cripple debuff. So it's going to slow your attack speed by 50%. It's going to reduce your movement speed by 50%, and it's also going to reduce your strength by 50%. Noth is not tauntable. So because of that, when he blinks away, as a caster, you don't want to just keep nuking him because he's reset his threat, but also because of the fact that he's going to be far away from the tank, and the tank is going to be slowed. So the tank can't just immediately run towards him and just re-pick him up immediately. You're gonna have to wait for basically the tank to just waddle on over, hit Naxx again, and to pick him up again. Now, Cripple is a magic debuff, so as a priest, you're gonna, or a paladin, you're gonna want to prio dispelling this Cripple ASAP on the tank. As long as you do that, it'll allow the tank to pick him up relatively quickly, and so therefore you can start going ham again. And then after that, the priest can prio dispelling the rest of the melee, or frankly, if they really just want to let it run out, they can, but I would recommend that your priest try their best to prioritize dispelling. Can you pre-fap it? That's a good question. I'll be honest, I'm not sure. The answer would be maybe. Let me see if the cripple is classified as a. Let me see if it's classified as a slow or as a snare. Hold on. I want to tell you something that's incorrect. First things first. Oh, 912. Okay, yes, it is a snare. It is classified as a snare. So yes, technically you could prefab it then if you want to. The only issue with prefabbing, and it's not that big of an issue, but the only thing you have to keep in mind is the blink window, like the time in which he blinks is not a set time. It's not like it's not like something where it's just on a set timer. So realistically, if you pop a fab something like 20 seconds or so into the fight, your 30-second duration of FAP should be able to cover at least the first blink. He should blink within that window because the blink occurs approximately every 25 to 30 seconds or so, ish, after the fight starts. So if you pop your first FAP at 20 or so seconds, yeah, you'll be fine. Or Blessing of Freedom, I guess, technically, but good luck getting a Paladin to pop you on that one. Realistically, the cripple's not that big of a deal. All it's going to do is slow down your DPS as a DPS warrior there for a sec. It doesn't do any damage, so really the only time in which you might want to consider prioritizing popping a FAP on this fight would be to, I guess, if you're trying to get your sick fucking juicy parson, or if you're trying to, if you're speed running and you're trying to nuke down Naxx as fast as you possibly can, and you don't want to have to wait for dispels. But is it mandatory you pop a FAP to avoid the cripple? No, there's nothing particularly dangerous about the cripple besides the fact that it makes it harder for the tank to pick up Naxx. So like I said, all you want to make sure for absolute certain is to prioritize the dispel on the tanks. So you can see right here, like the tank's 3 words and prowess were both instantly dispelled here when the cripple went out. So that way they can pick up Naxx again, so that way all the rest of the DPS can start going ham as soon as possible. Okay. Keep in mind, guys, I see you guys asking a bunch of random questions right now. I'm going to be talking about Naxx, at least for this section. If you want to talk about, if you want to ask about some other random stuff, I'll still be streaming after I'm done with this guide here, and you can ask me then. But at least for this little session right here, I'm going to be talking about just pretty much Naxx. Specifically, of course, like the Plague Wing. Technically, you could use the Living Action Potion. True, I suppose you could. Okay, so Naxx is a fight where if you kill him fast enough, you will never see the phase 2 that I was talking about. This is going to happen in this VOD. So before we get to that point, now let's go to the Boomer video that we were talking about before. There is a second phase. If it takes you too long to kill Naxx, after, I believe, 90 seconds of that initial phase 1 that we just watched right there, Naxx is going to teleport. So, see this mage is fighting Naxx. Fucking impossible to see here. Here's Naxx. Hi, what's up? Yeah, the Boomer phase. I'm not gonna, there will be guilds out there that reach the phase 2. There will be guilds out there that, the more casual guilds and just the more meh, whatever, middle to lower tier guilds will not have quite enough raid DPS to be able to kill Naxx before he teleports away from the raid. So this is something I want to talk about just for if you happen to be in a guild like that. So eventually, come on. Okay. It's hard to tell in this video because like the mage doesn't actually look at it, but Naxx is going to teleport out of like the main room here, and he's going to go onto like a little balcony that's up top. It's in this direction over here. And so you'll still be able to see the boss, but he's not going to be targetable. What's that macro he has? Like a mana gem and then mana potion? What? Weird. Okay, so when he teleports away, you're going to get 2 waves initially of 4 plagued champions. So like this guy that you're seeing right here. 4 of these guys are going to spawn. And the idea of this phase of the fight is just you basically just kill the ads during this phase. If you get to this phase, the good news is it's not the end of the world. This phase is not hard. It's like Razor Gore phase 1 basically. So if your raid DPS is low enough to the point where like, oh, we couldn't kill Naxx before teleport, are we fucked? Like, no, it just means the fight's gonna take longer. But like I said, it's only gonna be 4 of these guys that spawn twice. So the Plague Champions, if you do get them, they're mostly just jokes, to be honest. Like, they're gonna melee tanks for like 500 to 800 damage. They are gonna Mortal Strike as well. That does about 800 to maybe 1.2k damage on tanks or so, and like has the typical Mortal Strike debuff. And then they're going to do an AoE Shadow Shock as well. So like, kind of like, I guess, Domo ads come to mind as far as like who does a similar mechanic. Like Domo ads will do an AoE Shadow Shock. That's going to hit everybody in the raid for like 500 to 600 or so. Or well, anybody like within range. Like, I don't know what the exact range is, but it's in the neighborhood of like maybe 10 yards or so. You'll get hit by an AoE Shadow Shock once for like 500 to 600 damage. They don't do it frequently enough to the point where you're probably going to get hit by a second one. As long as you just kill the Plague Champion in a reasonable amount of time, you won't get a second Shadow Shock. But in theory, they could do it again if you take forever. Something to note is you can shackle these guys. I think they do it in this video. So yeah, you can see they're shackled over here. You're not going to need to shackle these guys. You can just group them up and cleave them down if you want to. Or you can just, even if you separate them out, you can just have tanks tank them all 4 off the sides of the room. Shackling's completely unnecessary. Might have been necessary back in the good old days, but not here. So you can see they killed those previous plagues. Like, they're working on the last plague champion. As they do, they get the 4 new ones that spawn. So like, they're gonna reshackle the new ones that spawn until they kill the old one. And so anyways, once you kill these plague champions here, the 2 waves of plagued champions, either after both waves are dead, or after a total, I believe, of after 60 seconds, or when the plague champions all die, Naxx will teleport back into the room, as you can see he just did right here. And basically at that point, you go back to phase 1 all over again. He'll just start doing the mechanics he was doing before, where he's summoning the skeleton guys and just blinking and doing the curse. So there also exists the potential, I guess, to get a second teleport up to the balcony. The balcony is like I said, it's up here. It's once again hard to tell, but that's where he teleports to, is up here. Even the most boomerist, like shittiest of guilds out there should never get a second teleport. If you do get a second teleport in 2020, it's probably just time to disband your guild, because you probably have literally no idea what you're doing. But technically, it can happen, and we're going to cover it just because, in case for whatever reason half your raid fucking died, let's say to the curse or something, and you're desperately trying to salvage the fight for some reason. We'll talk about the second teleport phase, because the second teleport phase is a little bit harder. Yeah, the light well, right? Some super boomer strat shit. You can get a second teleport, and basically the only difference between the first one and the second one is you're going to get the same 4 plagued guardians that spawned in the first wave, but you'll also get, in addition to that, what's called a plagued champion. If you get to this phase, this is a little bit more dangerous, because these plagued champions are going to be like skeletal wizard guys, if you know like the type of mob I'm talking about. These guys are going to spam arcane explosions, and the arcane explosions actually do kind of slap. The arcane explosions obviously are an AoE spell. They're gonna hit the entire raid for like in the neighborhood of like 1 to 1.2k. The good news is they can be stun locked, they can be slowed. They cannot be shackled, but you can stun lock and slow. So like ideally, if you get to this phase, you'd want to stun lock the the Plagued Champion, or sorry, no, the Plagued Guardian. The Plagued Guardian is the scary one. You'd want to stun lock the Plagued Guardian and make sure to kill it before he starts spamming AE and kills the entire raid. Like I said, you should never make it to this phase, even as like the shittiest of guilds out there, so if you do, you're probably griefing yourself and you probably deserve to wipe at this point anyways. But just like the initial phase 2, in this second part of phase 2, if you want to call it that, you get 2 waves of 4 Plague Champions plus a Guardian, and then a second wave of 4 Plague Champions and a Guardian. And then after that, after they're all dead, again, either after they're all dead or after another 60 seconds, Naxx will once again teleport back into the room. Technically, you can even get a third teleport, but I am not even going to talk about it because in 2020, you were going to wipe long before you reach the third teleport. So, Naxx is not a hard fight, as long as your mages aren't brain dead and know how to press their decurse button. Nothing about Naxx, I would say, is all that challenging to the point where Naxx is considered, and rightfully so, to be one of, if not the easiest boss to Naxx. I would say it's between this and Nubercon as far as like which boss in this instance is easiest. So, by the way, keep in mind, I say easy, but you do have to keep in mind that Naxx bosses, just on average, are going to hit significantly harder than bosses up in this game up to this point. What's up, TRS? Did you flurry me in this raid? I guess not. I don't remember getting flurry from you. Or from anybody, for that matter. I was just flurrying myself. Young baby Dali. I mean, I don't know. Did I really look that different? I mean, there I am. I don't know. Looks like me as far as I can tell. I'd like to think I haven't aged that much. But anyways, there's really nothing to worry about. If you're wiping on Naxx, you're probably in trouble. Let's just put it that way. So, this is the non-boomer version where you kill Naxx before he even teleports for the first time. Not so hard. Same amount of facial hair. Yep. Alrighty, so the next part we're going to reach after Naxx is dead is the Naxx version of a gauntlet. It's basically like the Naxx version of the suppression room or the bug tunnel, but when describing the difficulty of this Naxx gauntlet right here, it is far easier than the suppression room and maybe only slightly harder than the bug tunnel in AQ. So when you hear a gauntlet, don't be scared by this. Don't think like, ah, shit, another suppression room. Are we gonna get fucked over by yellows again? Like, nah, you're gonna be fine. This gauntlet was a pain in the ass in Light Soap, but it's not gonna be on Classic, I can tell you that. So there are going to be 3 types of mobs in this bug tunnel right here. What's the name of this video? This is just the Vanguard K3 server first Naxx clear that you can just find in my highlights. All right, so I guess first things first, traditionally the direction you might go in this gauntlet here is you would hug the right wall. So you'd take the right wall in, like hug it this way, go all the way this way, the back this direction, and hug the wall back here. In reality, on Classic, I would never recommend that you take that direction. You can at least initially just run through the center of the room. You're gonna want to like run to the right wall over here, like this back wall, and run along the wall in this direction. So as you run in, of course, you're gonna start aggroing shit, and just like the bug tunnel, just like suppression room, these grubs here and these bats that you're gonna aggro have a relatively short respawn time in the neighborhood of like 30 seconds or so. So make sure that you're not just dilly-dallying in one spot for too long. But besides that, it's just kind of like the same sort of situation where you move through it and kill shit as you go. Now, I will say that the distance you have to cover in this gauntlet is far shorter than the bug tunnel. It's probably about the same distance that you cover in like the suppression room, or maybe even a little bit less. So you're not really like you could, I guess, in theory, use like move speed items through this gauntlet if you're doing like a speed run, but it's not going to be quite the same as like, oh, we gotta like it takes like 2 minutes just to run through this entire tunnel. Like, it's not going to take you that long. Hagen is not that far away. What's up, Lilane? Should have used your VOD to show your death tracker. This is a rough one for you, yeah. You had a rough raid. Mine wasn't ideal either, but yeah, I think... What was your death count to this raid? You died like 7 or 8 times or something ridiculous, if I remember right. Okay, so... Here's the last type of mob that's inside here. We already saw the grubs. We already saw the bats. There's also one called a plague beast, so... I'm going to go over the mechanics of each of the mob types in here. Frankly, you're not going to have to worry about them. In reality, you're just going to nuke everything down in your path. But in case you care, the 3 types of mobs in the bug tunnel, or sorry, in the plague tunnel, are going to be frenzied bats. So these guys, they're just bats. The most of the type of mobs that you'll see in this tunnel are going to be the bats, and eventually you're going to probably just pull a shit ton and just AoE them all down, which is easy, nothing complicated about it. These bats are going to randomly charge you. That's the most annoying thing about it. Like, they're just going to choose a random target and charge you and stun you for 2 seconds. So as a mage, that might be sort of annoying if, like, it might cause you to fall behind a little bit. But like I said, not that big of a deal. Does a small amount of damage as well when they charge you, but nothing notable. And then they also do what's called a putrid bite, which basically just increases your physical damage taken. It's just like a physical damage debuff, or I think it's a disease actually, technically, which I'm pretty sure I guess can be dispelled. Make sure here. The reason I don't know this is because, like, you know, these mechanics don't actually really matter, but okay, so it is a disease. So yeah, sure, dispel the disease, I guess, if you get it. And it's just all it's going to do is increase the physical damage you'll take by 120. It's a 30-second debuff. And then there are the grubs, the mutated grubs. So let's see if we can find one here on the ground. I think we saw what this start. Yeah, so like this mutated grub, they just look like, you know, the carrion worms in EPL or something. Literally the only thing these guys do is they're going to just cast like a single target ability called Slime Burst. That's going to do peanuts as far as nature damage concerned. And it also is going to slow you for 5 seconds. That's the most annoying part. They're going to put like a 5-second slow on you. So stuff like that is going to slow your progress, I guess, through the plague tunnel. I think the play eventually might just be like, if you're speedrunning or something, you just pop like speed items in a FAP and literally just book it through this tunnel as fast as you can possibly go. So that way you're not worried about getting the slow debuff off the grubs and the charges from the bats. And then the last thing to worry about is going to be the plague beast. Now we just nuked that down so fast that you didn't really actually get to see it. Let's see if we can skip ahead and see another plague beast that we kill here. I think we will here at the end, right before Hagen. Patience, patience. Come on, Poggy. Move up, bud. Come on, come on. So we're at the end, by the way. This is the end of the bug tunnel, or the plague tunnel. I keep wanting to call it the bug tunnel. I think we have a emergency plague beast we have to kill here. Hold on, hold on. Wait for it. Wait for it. About to pull and then realize... Oh shit, there's one more plague beast. God damn, my stream quality sucked back in the day. All right, so plague beast right here. So it kind of looks like just like a swamp walker guy in like Swampazars or something. You missed Chrono CD? I know, right? That juicy 1.5 ppm. That was the dream, dude. Okay, so plague beasts are really the only slightly scary part about the plague tunnel here. The plague beasts, I think, were designed to be like an anti-melee sort of mob. So basically, this would be the sort of mob that you would have to have all the ranged kill and have to have the melee stay out. In reality, this will not be the case. You can just have your melee nuke these guys down too, but these guys are going to have a few different mechanics that are melee unfriendly. They're going to do what's called a trample, which is an AoE physical attack. So it's going to be like, technically, it's like a single targeted attack on you, but it occurs to everybody in melee range of the plague beast. It actually does a decent chunk of damage, so this is the reason why if it takes long enough to kill these guys, it can be melee unfriendly, but it's going to hit plate wearers for about 1 to 1.3k or so. So you can eat that because these guys will melt. If you eat like even 3 of those, you'll be fine. If you're a clothy though, you are going to want to stay away. It's going to hit you closer to like 1.8k if you're a clothy. So if you're standing next to a plague beast, like, yeah, you can take like 1 or 2, I guess, but you ideally don't want to take any of these because you could get slapped. It is physical damage, therefore the only thing that mitigates it is armor. So not the greatest idea to eat these as a clothy. And then the other thing these Plague Beasts do to live up to the name of being Plague Beasts is that they'll do an AoE like nature damage aura, basically. It's called like a mutated spores is the name of the mechanic, but it's just like an aura that they have that when you're standing within melee range of them, they're going to do 300 to 400 nature damage every 3 seconds, I believe it is. Yeah, 3 seconds. So all of those mechanics are designed to make it scary for melee. Is it actually scary in reality? No, you can watch the damage I'm taking here. Like, yeah, I take a little bit, but all right, and then it dies. You're fine. So just make sure if you aggro one of these guys, just make sure you prio it and just nuke it down as fast as you can. You can mostly, just like you would ignore the Vecnus drones in the bug tunnel in AQ40, you can kind of just ignore the grubs and the bats in this plague tunnel here. And the only thing you really have to make sure dies ASAP are the Plague Beasts, kind of like the Vecnus soldiers in the bug tunnel in AQ40. If you want, you could realistically just pull every single bat, every single grub to the very end of the tunnel right here, and then AoE nuke them all down once you gather them up at this point. So, by the way, Formos right there, RIP in peace, Formos. He died and went to DPS Warrior Jesus Heaven, I guess. Sipping mojitos on the beach with Alando right now. Must be nice. Okay, so this is the end of the plague tunnel right here. This right here is Hygen's room. So we're about to head in and start on Hygen. On this retail server right here, this was a safe spot. This was kind of like the spot before Fancrus, where you could like run up to the little boomer spot on the top left and like sit there without having to aggro the boss and without aggroing. Well, I'm not going to say aggroing nothing in the plague tunnel, but you could mostly just sit here and prepare for the boss. Like, casters could start drinking, and you could refresh your food buff here if you wanted to. On Classic, at least on the PTR, Hygen had a fucking enormous aggro radius. So basically, on the PTR, if you went, like the minute you went around this corner right here, like the minute you peeked your head around this corner, Hygen would aggro onto you instantly from over here. I'm 99% certain that that was bugged, and I'm pretty sure his aggro radius is supposed to be probably within the radius of his actual room, which like starts right here. So I am fairly certain you're going to be able to actually come around this corner and stack up on the spot right here by the time it goes live. I don't know that for sure, but I assume that's going to get fixed. Technically, yes, you can go to the other side as well if you want to as sort of a safe spot. On the PTR, that was like the safe spot that people were using instead of the more traditional one here on the right side. You could go over here. You can't really see it from this POV, but you could go over here and like to the other side of the gate leading into his room and LOS him and stay out of his LOS to the point where he wouldn't aggro and you could use that as your safe spot. I'll be honest, kind of like just like Fancrus, you don't really need to take a break going into Hygen. You can kind of just run straight in and just go for it. Unless you're in the dad boomer, get like, all right, everybody, get up to full mana. Already, right, make sure everybody refreshes their consumes. Refresh your food buff. Is everybody good? All right, let's start a ready check. Like, unless you're that sort of guild, which I know there are some, but right now, let's put it this way: if you go straight from the bug tunnel, run right into Fancrus with no pause, you're gonna be able to do the same thing for Hygen. Yeah, rip your trinket swaps, I guess. Make sure you equip your Hygen trinkets before you start this gauntlet. Am I going to put this on YouTube? I don't know about that, but I will definitely at least make this into a permanent highlight that you can go back and watch whenever you want to. Okay. And so, like I said, the overall difficulty of this gauntlet right here, significantly easier than the suppression room. It's really hard to fuck up this tunnel here. It's maybe slightly harder than the bug tunnel, but the only reason I say that is because the bug tunnel is an absolute fucking joke, and so like the only thing that at least maybe has a tiny sort of scary mechanic is the Plague Beasts, but even then, not much. Like I said, I'd say there's a high probability that eventually for speedrunning Naxx, you just run into this tunnel, pop a FAP, pop speed items, and just book it all the way through. Get to the end, AoE everything down, and then start Hygen. Speaking of which, let's start Hygen. Now, for any fans out there of Dance Dance Revolution, this is going to be the boss for you. Here's the dance boss. Here's the one where you have to learn the safety dance, and you have to... the fight where you ideally don't be that guy and like, oh, this guy died because he couldn't dance. Now, in reality, there's going to be a lot of guilds out there if you kill Hygen fast enough to the point where you're not even going to have to dance in the first place. But most guilds initially, at least, probably will have to do the dance. Maybe. I can tell you that Onslaught won't. We're going to nuke down Huygens so fast that we'll kill him before the dance even starts, but I would say your average guild will, at least initially, probably get one dance. Well, melee sort of always have to dance, kind of, yeah, but we'll get to that in a sec. Okay, so Huygens requires pretty specific positioning throughout the fight. Huygens not just a boss you can just tank anywhere you fucking want and where it doesn't matter. There are two things you have to worry about Huygens that forces you to position him in a certain way. Number one, he has an AoE mana burn that he does, so basically anyone within close proximity to the boss, and we're talking about like maybe 10 or so yards, is going to eat an AoE mana burn, which is going to do exactly what it sounds like. It's going to eat a lot of your mana and do shadow damage equivalent to how much mana it eats. So because of that, you can't just have Huygens stacked up on this platform up here. The platform up here is the safe spot in this room. And so in an ideal world where this AoE mana burn aura didn't exist, you could just tank him up on the platform and never have to move the boss. But because he does have the AoE mana burn, you have to tank him down here at range from the rest of the range and the rest of the healers to make sure they're not getting mana burned. And the reason why that's relevant is because the bottom portion, like off the platform here, like where you can see all like the green cracks in the floor, is where the dance part is going to occur. So you're going to see like what occurs every about 10 seconds or so is an eruption. And this happens throughout the entire fight. Like the dance portion doesn't start till later, but like the same pattern of how the eruptions occur starts as soon as you aggro the boss. Yeah, enhanced shamans and red pallies are fucked, by the way. GG. So, the good news is these eruptions go out in a very predictable pattern. The eruptions, by the way, for those that don't know, it's kind of like when Ani does her fear and then like the lava like erupts from the cracks. It's the exact same thing here. So when you see like the green slime here erupt from the cracks, I guess it's supposed to be like acid or something. If you're standing in the middle of those eruptions, it's going to do 3.5 to 4.5k nature damage. And that is unresistible damage. It's just like a guaranteed 3.5 to 4.5k. So you can eat like one. You can get away with failing once. The second time, though, you're probably dead. Now, that's more relevant later in the dance phase, but regardless, like I said, these eruptions occur in a very predictable pattern. So when you start the fight, there's going to be 4 individual safe zones. We're going to get to those when we talk about the dance, but your tank is going to have to know how to position the Huygens throughout the initial phase 1 so that he's tanking it in the safe zone, and as soon as you see the eruption go off, you move it to the next safe zone. Then another eruption goes off. Wait for it, wait for it. You move to the next safe zone, like so, and you just keep going back and forth until the dance phase starts. With no buffs, you don't think you can eat it? I mean, as a warrior, even without buffs, I've got like 6.5 or 7k health. You can absolutely eat one. Okay, other thing to note on Huygens, he does have a couple of other mechanics during this phase as well. He's got a debuff that he's going to put onto anybody within melee range every now occasionally, called Decrepit Fever. It's not going to affect the range, just the people in melee range. And it's a debuff. It's a disease that's going to last 21 seconds that does 500 nature damage every 3 seconds. And perhaps more notably, is going to reduce your max health by 50%. So really, when this disease goes out, and I think it goes out at some point here during this phase. Patience. There it is. Okay, there it is right here. You can see the entire, everybody in melee range is going to take this. You have to 100% make sure you prioritize dispelling the tank immediately, because like the nature damage that you're going to take over time is not that big of a deal. The big deal about this debuff is that it reduces your max health. It cuts your health in half. So because of that, you don't want your tank with half of his health. So healers need to A, prioritize dispelling ASAP, and then B, topping the tank back off after the dispel happens, so that way he doesn't get wrecked by Huygens. And something I was going to talk about Noth, and I somehow got distracted, was keep in mind, even when I'm talking about the easy bosses here, Naxx bosses are going to hit harder than the hardest hitting bosses in AQ40 right now, ignoring Enraged Kree. So, for example, Noth that we were talking about, even though Noth looks like a joke and he's just punching you, and that's literally all he does, he's just like sitting there the entire fight, just like punching your main tank. Believe it or not, he actually does slightly more auto attack damage than Uru does. So you can't just treat their auto attacks like a complete fucking joke. Hygen is no different. His auto attacks are on the same lines as hitting a little bit harder than Uru does. So can you dual wield tank these bosses? Yes. If your main tank right now dual wield tanks Uru, then you can dual wield tank these guys just fine. But as a healer, you can't just you can't treat these guys like a complete and total joke. Like you can't just like for example, when this Decrepit Fever goes out, can you just ignore the tank for 4 or 5 seconds, be like, oh, hold on, let's dispel all the melee, let's chain heal, let's top up all the melee, like, no, you're gonna want to make sure you keep the tank alive, of course. Nucklop, I'm not gonna talk about loot in the stream, we already kind of did that in the review. Yes, he drops Select Blades of Carnage, though. So really, when the Decrepit Fever goes out here, prioritize dispelling the main tank ASAP. As far as the rest of the raid, it's really not that big of a deal if they don't get dispelled, at least not immediately. Ideally, your healers want to eventually dispel this, but honestly, like, even if the melee core eats this entire buff, or this entire duration of that debuff, yeah, we're gonna get to this part in a second. Even if as a melee core you eat the entire duration of this debuff, as long as like the shamans are chain healing you, if your alliance just whatever, getting focused by pallies, spamming Flash of Light or something, you can just eat the entirety of the damage if you want to just have your healers focus on healing and nothing else. I'd still recommend that the disease gets cleansed at some point. Ideally, you don't let the entire thing go through because it's probably more efficient to cleanse compared to just eating all the damage. But like I said, the prioritization for the dispel is just without question the main tank immediately. That's the only one you realistically have to worry about. Okay. The last mechanic that can occur during phase 1 is the teleports. There's a completely separate room from Hygen's room right here that you might have to deal with at some point during the fight. It's similar to the Cthulhu's stomach mechanic, where you're gonna Hygen's gonna select 3 random people in the raid to teleport periodically throughout the fight, where you're just gonna get teleported to the new room. And real life, to answer your question, yes, eruptions will go off throughout the entire fight. They never stop. And you're saying imagine not having disease cleansing totems. The only thing to keep in mind is that it might be sort of hard to be in range of disease cleansing totem, just because keep in mind like the shamans have to stay at range from Hygen to not get mana burn. But can you probably like put the disease cleansing totem at the very lip of the edge of the platform and be in range of the melee still? Probably. I'm not completely sure, to be honest, but you probably can. Okay, so you have a small chance throughout the phase 1 portion of the fight, like the non-dance portion, of getting teleported to this room. For context, by the way, when you reach the end of this room over here and turn right, that leads right back to Hygen's room that we were just in. So this room's annoying, and if you get teleported here for the first time and you panic, this is probably the easiest way to die during Hygen, unless you're completely brain dead and don't know how to dance. And by the way, the irony is going to be that I'm going to die here. So I'm going to show you exactly what you don't do when you get teleported to this room. So there's 2 things you have to worry about in this room, okay? You got the diseased maggots, and you've got the eye stalks. The eye stalks are basically identical to the small eye tentacles on Cthulhu. They essentially have the exact same mechanics. Can you teleport the tank? No, it cannot teleport the tank. And Hygen's not tauntable, because if the main tank got teleported and Hygen wasn't tauntable, you'd be kind of fucked, right? So when you get teleported to this room, you're gonna have to deal with the eye stalks right here, like I said, and the diseased maggots. Diseased maggots are grubs that have no mechanics, and they move really slowly, but they hit really fucking hard. They're gonna hit you for like 1.5k, even on like plate per melee hit. So you can't take a lot of punishment from these guys. So when you get to this room, the goal is to eventually just be able to run through this little gauntlet right here and make it back to Hygen's room so you can rejoin the fight. The correct way to approach this room is to try to move as a team. So you move like, you have 3 people get teleported. You want to move in a unit, 3 players on top of each other. And you want to stay constantly moving. You never really want to stop through this gauntlet, because if you stop, the disease maggots have a move speed that's slow enough to the point where you can outrun them. It is not difficult to outrun these guys. But if you stop at some point and they catch up, you're probably just going to get insta-murked. The thing that makes it easier said than done is the fact that the eye stalks are going to mind flay you, just like the small eye tentacles on Cthulhu will do. And so if you get mind flayed, that's going to put a slow on you, and therefore the maggots will be able to catch up to you. If that happens, you're probably fucked. So getting teleported here with these specific players really fucking sucks. If it's just 3 melee DPS that are teleported, it's going to make running through this room a pain in the ass. Because ideally what you do is a ranged person is going to interrupt these eye stalks, or a ranged DPS is going to kill this from range before you even have to reach the maggots in the first place. Hey, what's up, Thor? Numbers coming in hot with that tier 1 sub. Appreciate it, dude. Glad you're enjoying. Your sub will go directly to the Hot Pockets and Doritos Fund. So, ideally, if you're lucky, you either get a healer and or a ranged DPS teleported with you if you're a melee DPS. If it's 3 melee DPS, like, what you want to prioritize is killing the eye stalks, because their mind flay on you is what's going to fuck you over. If you get mind flayed for too long and you're slowed for too long, the maggots, like I said, will catch up and kill you. So this sucks right here. The proper play is just to try to run in and kill the eye stalk, but it sucks because like the maggots are going to hit you a bit. And what you want to continuously do is run through this room, prio the eye stalks the entire way through, as you ideally continuously run the entire time as a unit stacked up on top of each other. So that way you can just constantly outrun the maggots and then eventually rejoin the fight. Like I said, as melee DPS, it is not easy, and keep in mind, you can kill these maggots. They don't have a ton of health, but I wouldn't really recommend trying. I go with the exact incorrect play here. I run backwards. That was not the right play here because I get separated from the rogues. The rogues try to kill them. I try to catch back up to them, but I die because like the correct play was just run this direction. So do not do do not do the Heigen like eye stalk room this way. This is an easy way to kill yourself. The maggots have a really small aggro radius. No, I'd call it like maybe it's a little bit small, but it's not like so tiny to the point where you can just walk past them. So the boomer strat for this room, if you're a melee DPS and you're all melee DPS and you're panicking and you're not really sure if you can make it through as just a melee core, what you can do is basically just wait for the next set of 3 people to get teleported, because as long as you have even really just 1 ranged DPS and or a healer that gets teleported, you're going to be fine. Because a healer can top you up if you're really desperate, and a ranged DPS can just kill or interrupt the eye stalks from range to the point where you're not going to get mind flayed. And if you're not mind flayed ever at this point, you just run directly through the room. In no danger. Keep in mind, something to worry about when you're in this room is that you want to make sure you get back to Heigen's room before the dance starts. Because when the dance starts, the room's going to look like this. You can see like these plague clouds on top of the eye stalk platforms. These plague clouds are going to hit you for the same amount of damage that you'll get hit by in the room if you're standing in the wrong spot. So you don't want to be standing in this room when the dance starts. You want to be able to make it back before then. How much health do the eye stalks have? Not much, only 500. So like as a mage, you can just fire blast once and they're dead. As a warrior, you can go up to melee them as well. It's more dangerous, but just like 1 set of auto attacks will also kill them. So don't be like me. Don't die in the Heigen tunnel like this. I was dumb. Alright, now, we're going to switch over to the boomer POV of this fight because we want to watch the actual dance. First things first, we can watch this fight at the start from a ranged POV. Jesus Christ, this UI. Motherfucking tunnel vision. If you're a ranged DPS on this fight, your camera angle and your POV is going to be really scuffed because you're going to have to be on this platform facing this direction, like with the wall to your back to the point where like you're going to be in this giant clusterfuck of other ranged people and it's going to be kind of hard to see the boss individually. So just, you know, that doesn't really have an effect on anything, but just keep in mind your field of vision is going to be kind of fucked as a range here. But this is what it looks like from a ranged POV, in that like you're standing on this platform, DPSing from here as Heigen gets moved throughout this room. to the left and then to the right, back and forth. Look at the debuffs. I know I did. Got the Mortal Strike up there. Got the Rogue Poison on there. Siphon Life, Corruption. Nice, nice. Ooh, Hemorrhage. Nice, nice. Boomers. Feels good, man. They at least have Curse of Rekka. That's good. Sunder's Fairy Fire. Like, all right. Siphon Life, not so good. Or Drain Life, I mean. That Insect Swarm I just saw? Yikes, dude. Yeah, rip the Deadly Poison. Okay, anyways, you can kind of see that it's a little bit easier to tell the pattern of the Phase 1 eruptions from this POV. Basically, during the Phase 1 portion of the fight, your main tank's going to move left throughout the room. When he gets to the end, he's going to move back right. He's just going to go in like an arc. Did someone really put up Curse of Doom? Where? I don't see it. I don't see it, Doom. But anyways, regardless. When the dance finally happens, and this happens after 90 seconds into the fight, so if you cannot kill Huygen within 90 seconds of the fight, you're going to have to start doing the dance phase. I will get to the viability of killing Huygen before then. We're going to talk about whether you're going to have to dance or not. But regardless, if you get to the dance, it's going to look like this, okay? You're running through the room. If you stand in the green scary acid poison, if you eat more than one eruption, you're going to die. Let's see if the skill can make it through. They got some deaths, though. You hate to see it. As you can probably tell by watching this, this is not hard. If you fail the dance, you might have brain damage. Okay, so you have to do this for about, I believe it's 45 seconds. And then as soon as those 45 seconds are over, you go back to like phase 1 where you just all the casters stand on the platform again, all the melee stand down below again. Okay, so first things first. Because the dance, like the acid that comes through the floor here gives nature damage or does nature damage, it is not the worst idea to pre-pop a GNPP for Huygen. Not because you desperately need nature protection if you do this fight properly, but if you do happen to fuck up the dance, or if you do happen to fuck up your positioning as a melee during phase 1, it is not the worst idea in the world to just have the GNPP as like kind of a backup option. Because if you have a GNPP popped as a melee, you can probably eat 2 eruptions and survive, as opposed to if you don't have a GNPP, you can really only eat 1 and then you'll die. And if you're dancing and you fall behind, it can be difficult to catch up. So like if you take 1 eruption, you might end up taking another one because you're too far behind and you're gonna die. So, how does the dance work? I mean, with your eyeballs right there, it probably wasn't hard to tell, but for those that still are struggling to figure out what exactly you're supposed to do it, I made a nice little handy image beforehand that we're gonna pull up here, okay? This is super secret PTR footage screenshots. I had to blur some stuff out, but this should give you an idea, all right? This is gonna be your POV when you're dancing in Noth's room, all right? You're probably going to be facing in this direction. I'd recommend when you're running through this section right here that you're just strafing back and forth, kind of like in an arc. Okay. And so what you're going to want to do, if you really want to know where to stand during the dance, just look at the platform. The platform makes it nice and easy. There are 4 safe zones, okay? Safe zone 1 right here, safe zone 2 right here, safe zone 3 right here, safe zone 4 right here. Whenever the dance starts, and whenever the fight starts, in fact, the first safe zone is always going to be safe zone 1 right here. Okay, so the safe zones are just repeatedly just going to go back and forth, back and forth. So when you start the fight and the tank needs to start like positioning Huygen at the start of the fight, you're gonna want to position Huygen in the safe zone 1 right here. Okay, you're gonna see the eruptions go off in the non-safe zone, so they'll go off in these 3. As soon as you see the eruptions go off, the tank is gonna want to move Huygen to the second safe zone right here. Eruptions go off in 3, 4, and 1 then. Okay, as soon as that happens, then the tank moves into safe zone 3. All right, eruptions go off. You move him to safe zone 4. Eruptions go off. And then you move him back to safe zone 3, so on and so forth. and you just alternate back and forth. It's very predictable. It never changes. You never have to go like, you never have to move in one direction and all of a sudden like move in the other direction and then randomly back in the other direction again. Like it's none of that. You're always just going consistently in this arc, back and forth, back and forth. If you're struggling to know in the moment where exactly the safe zone is, like where, like, you know, if you're trying to figure out like, okay, where does this quadrant start and where does this quadrant end? Just look at the platform, okay? If you're going to safe zone 4, an easy way to tell is just kind of look at the corner of the platform here. The corner, like the right angle the corner makes, kind of creates a line. You can kind of see like it creates this little slope downwards from the platform that creates a line that just goes in this direction. Just look at the line. If you want to be in safe zone 4, just be to the right of this line. If you want to be in safe zone 3, just be to the left of this imaginary line that this corner creates. Same thing applies for this side as well. Just be on the left of it if you want to be in safe zone 1, to the right of it if you want to be in safe zone 2. If you're going between 2 and 3, all you need to do is just look at this little diamond on the platform right here. Just look at the middle of this diamond where it converges here. This represents the breakpoint between safe zone 2 and safe zone 3. So if you want to be in safe zone 2, just stand to the left of this little imaginary line created by the square here, the diamond here. And if you want to be in safe zone 3, be to the right. It's really as simple as that. When you're actually dancing, the eruptions are going to go off. Obviously, the eruptions go off faster when the dance occurs. Like, so everybody's going to be following the same pattern that the tank was following during phase 1, but the entire raid has to do it, and you have to do it faster because the eruptions happen more frequently. Can I share the screenshot? Yeah, sure. I mean, you can just look at the link that I have right here, but let me just put it in chat. There you go. So the pace at which you're going to have to run during the dance back and forth here is going to be a tiny bit slower than run speed pace. With that boomer video we just watched, when you watch them do the dance, you can see he's almost running at like just regular character run speed, but not quite. He does stop like momentarily every single time. God damn, this footage is awful. So everyone starts here in safe zone 1, okay? That's where you always go, whether it's at the start of the fight or at the beginning of the dance or the beginning of the phase right after the dance occurs. The first safe zone will always be safe zone 1 here on this side of the room. So when you look at the screenshot, the first safe zone will always be over here. So always start here, like at the start of each phase right here. Okay, so they're going to be running. He's going to stop like, you can see here, he's just running straight through. He stops like very briefly, stops here. Okay, keep going. You're going to stop briefly. Oh, he cut that close. He should have stopped a little bit earlier. You stop there, and then you wait. And so basically, it's just this almost consistent run back and forth to make sure that you don't get hit by the eruptions. Don't run too far. It's really easy to get greedy and want to run too far. There's no need to chance it. In reality, there's plenty of forgiveness here. There's plenty of, like, you don't have to run all the way to the very fucking edge before the next safe zone. Just run to the middle of the safe zone if you want to play it safe. Stop there and then keep running. It's better to play it safe at first and not fuck this up. Okay? By the way, for those wondering why the fuck, like, why don't you just stand on the platform? Like, why don't you just stand up here during the dance? Like, couldn't you just avoid the eruptions? The answer is no, you cannot, because that'd be too easy. When the dance phase is occurring, it's kind of hard to see here, but there's like this faint green cloud. There's a poison cloud on top of this entire platform that if you stand in it, it basically just kills you almost instantly. So, you have no choice but to stand down here. So, for anybody that was thinking just like, oh, well, I'm not going to dance, I just stand up here. I don't know, maybe I'll just take a little damage. Like, no, your ass is going to die if you stand up here. Alright. The last thing I'll talk about when it comes to dancing is do not rely on other people's positioning to know where to stand yourself. Because of both batching and latency between what you see and other people see. If like, for example, somebody said, like, just put someone on /follow that knows what they're doing, that will get you killed 100% of the time. Because your game client, as far as where you see people standing, there's going to be a slight bit of delay, just a tiny, tiny delay as to where you see others and where they actually are. A perfect example, I've got a clip of this, is right here, okay? Here's me failing the dance. And when you watch this, you're going to see this and think like, That doesn't look like you failed the dance. It looks like you did it. And frankly, this clip is kind of bullshit right here, but it's going to illustrate the point I'm making, all right? I look like I'm standing right here directly on top of Meats and Monstrous and Sakuja right here, right? I get hit by the explosion. Whereas Monstrous and Meats do not, even though I was standing directly on top of them. So don't just stand on top of somebody and hope they know what they're doing. Okay? Rely on yourself. Because in reality, I still, I go back and watch this clip, I still kind of think, man, this was kind of bullshit right here, because, the eruption goes off here and I get hit by it? Yeah, this was, some serious fucking NA internet right here for sure. And this is kind of why batching has me a little bit worried about this fight. I mean, I did the dance just fine on the PTR, but, it is definitely a bit worrying with the batching. So the point, like I said, I'm trying to make is don't rely on others, rely on yourself to make sure you run through this properly. I was still falling behind a little bit too much here. You know, I should have been over here by the time the eruption happens. So make sure you don't cut it too close. All right. As long as you can pull off running back and forth repeatedly in the same pattern, in the same two directions every time, you'll be fine. And so after that, that's it, and you can kill Hygen. Now, we kill Hygen in this video, but you can't see it because I was too busy being dead in the tunnel. That is unfortunate. But eventually, Hygen will repeat this process. It's a cycle that goes 135 seconds long. It's going to be 90 seconds where he's the standard phase 1 where you're just DPSing him, and then 45 seconds of dancing. And then once the 45-second dance finishes, he comes back down. If it takes another 90 seconds before you kill him, then you have to dance again for 45 seconds. Then another 90 seconds of killing him, repeat, so on and so forth. In theory, just forever. I don't know if Hygen has an enrage technically, but it shouldn't matter. Now, realistically, are you going to actually have to dance? Because like I said, it is 90 seconds until Hygen actually starts the first dance. Hygen has approximately 1.8 million health. For context, Huhuron has 1 million. So if Hygen has less than 2 times the amount of health as Huhuron, and right now your guild can kill Huhuron in, let's say, about 45 seconds or so, 45 seconds or faster, you will probably kill Hygen before the dance. So I can guarantee you, Onslaught and all the top guilds in the world, it's not even gonna be close. We're most certainly gonna kill Hygen before ever having to dance, which will be nice because it just removes that factor of potentially fucking up the dance, as hard as that might be. I would say if you want a really, really rough cutoff for your guild right now as to whether you're going to be able to kill Hygen fast enough, at least right now, initially, I would say your Huhuron probably has to be faster than about 50 seconds. That's just a sort of benchmark. If you can do Huhuron faster than 50 seconds, you probably will. So the dad gamer guilds out there, yeah, we'll still have to dance, but I'd say probably the top 50th percentile of guilds probably won't. Is this the fight to wreck? It depends on the guild, I guess. If you're close to the threshold where you can almost kill him before dance, it might make sense to wreck. Otherwise, do you need wreck eventually once you get to a certain level of raid DPS to make sure you get him before the dance? No. You can just do it with normal cooldowns and normal gameplay. So that's something you're gonna have to decide on a guild by guild basis. What are the ideal bosses to wreck? That's something, like I said, that's, once again, it's not really a set answer. There's no obvious option to wreck on in Naxx, I would say. It's going to be guild dependent. Ideally, you're going to want to wreck on fights where you're going to, in order to avoid mechanics. So you might need to wreck on Hygen, but you probably won't. I guess if you're cutting the Noth teleport close, you might want to wreck on Noth, although that's a little scary with the blink aggro resets. You could consider wrecking on Gluth later on if you want to try to avoid the Decimate. You could wreck on Makesna if you want to burn her down as fast as possible before the next web rep and your tank gets killed. We'll talk about all those fights in detail. The only reason you'd wreck on this fight is if you're cutting it close between having to dance and not dancing. That's about it. Between the teleports and melee dancing, you feel like the DPS uptime will be worse than on Huron? A little bit, yeah, but like that's not going to be that big of a difference. Okay. Anyways, that's about all there is to Huygen. Like I said, as long as your tank knows how to position the boss properly, and as long as you understand the concept behind like how you run through this little section, you'll be fine. There's nothing particularly scary about this fight, especially as a ranged. There's really nothing that can fuck you over. The scariest part is frankly if you get teleported. As long as you know what to do in the teleport and you don't panic like I did sort of here, then you're not gonna die. As long as you just know how to press W, basically. Alright. And the good news is, after you're done with Huygen, there's no trash to Loatheb. You just run straight to Loatheb. This is Loatheb's room right here, so cool. Literally nothing to do besides just go to the next boss. Nice. Plague Wing, I would say, is probably the shortest of all 4 wings, by the way, in case you're wondering. The longest one is probably Death Knight Wing or maybe Abomination Wing. Abomination Wing has more bosses, but Death Knight Wing has more trash. And then Spider Wing is a little bit shorter than those other 2, I would say. But Plague Wing is by far the shortest one of the four at least initial ones. It has the least amount of trash and relatively short boss fights. Okay, so Loatheb. This being the final boss of the Plague Wing is going to be one of those, the pomper fights, man. It's time to pomp, okay? For those that enjoy critting, this is a good fight. First things first, if you're a melee DPS, or really, if you're any person in the raid, you want to pre-pop a Greater Shadow Protection Potion for this fight. If you don't pre-pop a Greater Shadow Protection Potion and you engage Loatheb before you do that, you're probably already in trouble. If you're melee DPS, you can also consider pre-popping a Greater Nature Protection Potion. That is not as big of a deal, but there's certainly no downside to it, so I'd recommend if at least you're initially progressing on Loatheb, it's not the worst idea to pre-pop a GNPP here as well if you have plenty of time before you actually start the fight. You know, if your raid leader's just sitting there like, all right, guys, we're gonna explain the fight now for 20 minutes, that's a good time to press your green potion. Loatheb, the gimmick of this fight is that your healers are going to be very, very limited. So because of that, you're going to have to be as a non-tank, you're going to have to be responsible for your own HP. As a warrior, or as basically any DPS, or basically as any person that isn't the tank on this fight, you are responsible for not dying. You are not going to get a single heal during this fight from a healer, if you're not the tank. Should you wear your rec set for this fight? Yeah, that'd be a smart idea. We'll get to that in a sec, but not the worst idea. Adras says Diamond Flask gear. If you're the tank, yeah, this is absolutely a fight where the tank is going to want to use this Diamond Flask set. If you're a DPS warrior, you're not going to want to use your Diamond Flask set, and I'll get to why here in a second. So, first things first. The biggest gimmick of this fight is the debuff that all of the healers are going to get that's called Corrupted Mind. Corrupted Mind is a debuff that's going to go onto every healer as soon as the fight starts. That will put a 1-minute cooldown across the board for all heal, cleanse, and dispel spells for every single healer. So basically what that means is a healer is not going to be able to, is only going to be able to use a healing spell or technically a cleansing spell, but please don't use a cleansing spell. A healer is only going to be able to use a heal spell every 1 minute during this fight. And that applies to every single healer in the raid. So because of that, you're going to have to set up healing rotations. You're only going to be able to focus heals on the main tank, so that's why I said nobody else is going to receive heals, because like you're going to have to focus on keeping the main tank alive. So the way you want to do it is you set up a rotation in advance. You don't want to just wing it, because you're going to very quickly die if you just wing it. So what you want to do is have like, okay, this healer goes first, like this healer heals the tank first. Okay, once this healer is healed, all right, let's say the next healer, let's say if you're just going by group, for example, like A-Bar, all right, you heal first. All right, A-Bar says, probably just like through a macro or a weak aura. That's what you're probably going to want to use here. His macro will announce like, hey, I healed, Delthar's up next, okay? And then Delthar, he waits for the main tank to take some damage. All right, Delthar heals, he announces over his macro or through a weak aura like, hey, Delthar healed, Skunk is up next. Wrecking Loatheb is the real play. It is absolutely not, and I'll get to why in a second. All right. So, as a healer here, I don't know a lot about healers. You know, I'm not a healer expert, but I can tell you for sure, as a healer here, when it's your turn to cast your healing spell, you want to use like the fucking fattest, juiciest heal you have here. You're not going to run out of mana because you're casting one heal spell every minute. So this fight is not about mana efficiency as a healer. This fight is about when you do cast your heal spell, you want to make sure that heal lands for as hard as it possibly can. So like if you're a priest, for example, you might want to consider running 8 of 8 tier 2 as long as like your main tank can afford that buff slot. If you have Scarab Brooch, extremely valuable in this fight. If you have any sort of like on-use trinkets just in general, so like ZHC or Hibernation Crystal, Toe Up even, I guess, then as a healer, you're going to want to pop that as well. Anything you can do to make your one single heal for as much as possible, you're going to want to use it. Yeah, Inner Focus should work. So yeah, Priest would absolutely want to combine it with Inner Focus. A Shaman's just going to want to land a max rank healing wave, Paladin a max rank Holy Light, and Druid's just a max rank healing touch. So, in theory, as long as you have enough healers here, you can cycle through a healer. Okay, so this one heals, and then this one heals, and this one heals. By the time you reach the last one, ideally, your first healer is now off of that 1 minute cooldown, and you can just start back at the start of the rotation. As far as how your tank is going to gear on this fight, he can't just gear on for... He's not going to want to just gear for like full on, just like TPS, like dual wield tanking with all of his TPS gear on. He doesn't necessarily have to wear like full on mitigation. I'm not saying like, oh, you got to wear full tier 2 and use your car door and you got to use your Krulsuar. Like, that's not quite the case because the threat will matter at the start of this fight. But he wants to make sure that he mitigates enough damage to the point where like he's not getting hit so hard and so fast that the healers, by the time the final healer heals, you want to make sure that the first one is off cooldown. So you don't want the tank to take too much damage here. Yeah, Dahoon, you're right. Diamond Flask, at least for the first minute of the fight, will make... For the first minute, will make this fight a joke. Because Diamond Flask can largely just heal through most of the damage that Loatheb does. Because Loatheb doesn't hit particularly hard. Well, okay. Relative to the rest of the Naxx bosses, he doesn't hit particularly hard. I don't want to say he just doesn't hit hard at all, because he still hits about as hard as, like, Uru. So that's not, like, nothing, but... You know, as long as you combine the healers, like the healers healing one at a time, plus the Diamond Flask healing, and the fact that really nobody else is being healed, so nobody else is, like, eating other heals... Yeah, with a Diamond Flask, like a good Diamond Flask healing set on your main tank, it would make this fight insanely easy at the start. So... First of all, let's just start this fight so you guys can kind of see what the start of this fight looks like. Just like you have rotations for a healer, you're going to have rotations for the melee and just for the DPS in general as well. Because there's going to be a mechanic that allows you to go absolutely fucking ham this fight as a DPSer. This is one of the most fun fights to DPS on. You're going to see here, you're going to see why here in a second. So, first things first. When I mentioned previously that popping a GNPP is not the worst idea in the world, Loatheb is going to do a poison to people that are in melee range periodically throughout the fight. It doesn't happen like, it's not like a constant thing, but you're going to get a poison at some point. This one right here. It's not that huge of a deal. It's a poison it lasts 12 seconds. It's a debuff that does 196 nature damage every 6 seconds. It's kind of a joke. Basically, I think Blizzard put in this poison as a mechanic on Loatheb to counteract the fact that melee, generally speaking, have more HP overall than casters, and for warriors specifically, they have a bit of self-healing, like Bloodthirst can self-heal yourself. So like, if anything, really, honestly, as a warrior, when you consider both Crusader procs and Bloodthirst healing, you're pretty much going to completely make up for that nature damage you're going to take here, just through Bloodthirst and Crusaders, to the point where this will, on like net average, do no damage. Which is why I said that popping a greater nature protection potion before this fight isn't really all that big of a deal. As a rogue, it might matter a little bit more, but once again, not really that much. And then yes, Tony No Thumbs, you're correct. And then also something mentioned earlier was correct in that Poison Cleansing Totem will work as well. Poison Cleansing Totem is not on the minute cooldown. I don't know about Healing Stream, to be honest, but I can tell you for sure Poison Cleansing Totem is not restricted by that 1 minute cooldown, so because of that, every time this poison goes out, Shamans can just drop Poison Cleansing, instantly remove this, and remove this as a mechanic. Alliance cannot do that, but yeah, Paladins can just put Judgment of Light on if they want. even if they don't, frankly, it doesn't really matter. Warriors, like I said, can just heal themselves through Bloodthirst and through Crusader procs. Rogues can't do that as much, so if anything, like the Rogues are going to get a little bit more chunked, in theory, over time by this poison. It does, yeah, that is true. It does stop bandaging. We'll get to that later on, but if anything, if like you're trying to prioritize getting this shit off, a rogue can use like elixir poison resistance still, or any sort of poison removal, like self removal. That's how you're going to prevent the bandage interruption. But regardless, as a DPSer, you don't take any damage really for the first 2 minutes of this fight. The only person that's going to take literally any damage at all, or any significant amount of damage, is going to be the tank, because he's really the only one taking. He's the only one taking auto attacks, obviously, from the boss, and there are no damage mechanics on this fight besides that shitty poison for the first 2 minutes. Okay. Another thing I should mention, by the way, Loatheb has a feature where he's going to cast a decurse on himself. It happens very quickly at the start of the fight, so like about 2 or 3 seconds after you engage Loatheb, he's going to cleanse himself of all curses. And then that's periodically going to happen again on a 30-second, like, reliable timer. Just like every 30 seconds, he removes all curses off himself. Not that big of a deal. Warlocks will probably want to get a weak aura that just shows them, like, hey, Loatheb just removed curses, like, reapply your curse, whatever it is. So as long as your Warlocks aren't asleep at the wheel, that can be easily countered by just reapplying curses. Okay. The major gimmick of this fight, as a DPSer, and what allows you to kill Loatheb within a reasonable amount of time, are going to be the fungal spores. So, every 12 seconds, right after this fight starts, there's going to be a spore that spawns somewhere in the room. You can see there's grates. There's a grate over here. I'm going to turn around at some point. There's a grate over here. Come on. Come on, Poggy. Turn around, turn around, turn around. Poggy, buddy. Here we go. Okay. So there's a grate over here. And there's a grate. I'm not going to see it, but it's to my right. So this spore right here that just spawned, that we just killed, can spawn on any one of these grates, or at this gate at the back of the room, or the gate at the front of the room that you entered in. So there's 6 separate places the spores can spawn. It's just random every time it spawns as to which spot it spawns in. The novelty of these spores is that when you kill them, the closest 5 people to those spores will gain, it's a debuff, but it's going to be a beneficial debuff. When you kill the spore and you're one of the 5 people that's closest to that spore, the debuff is going to give you 50% extra melee crit, 60% extra spell crit, and cause you to do 0 threat. So basically, once you get this debuff, you're free to just go as hard as you possibly fucking can, and you don't have to worry about threat as a mechanic at all. So that's why as a tank, I was mentioning earlier, like, why a tank, it's not the worst idea for a tank to wear a shield in this fight, or if anything, a tank can start off with dual wielding, and then once enough people have gained this debuff, you can put a shield on, because you might as well mitigate more damage. Because once the majority of the raid, and eventually all of the raid, gets this debuff, threat is a non-issue. With one exception, we'll talk about that in a second. So, when it comes to optimizing this debuff right here, you have to plan this in advance. You can't just fucking wing it. You can't just be like, oh, it's a spore. Let me go kill it. I want the debuff. Oh. Because if your entire DPS core just wings it, then people are just going to randomly get the debuff and randomly be able to refresh it, and like you're not going to be able to really have it across the entire raid. This debuff lasts 1.5 minutes. And like I said, these little fuckers are going to spawn every 12 seconds. So in theory, group 1 can get it, okay? Or just like a set of 5 people can get it. And then 12 seconds later, another set of 5 can get it. And like eventually you have 8 people that get it. So 8 times 12, 96. So the debuff lasts 90 seconds. And you can get a new spore. Like the first group, if you cycle through all 8 groups, the first group can get another spore again 96 seconds later. So that it almost completely overlaps. You might have about 6 or 10 seconds where you don't have the debuff. Do hunters benefit from the debuff? I don't think they do, actually. I think it's specifically melee and spell crit. Let me check, hold on. Hold on. Oh, it's Fungal Bloom. That's what it is. Okay, so here's the spell right here. Critical chance, hit chance increased by 50%. Okay, it looks like hunters do benefit then. Damn it, that'd been so memeable if this was melee critical chance. But no, it's just generic crit chance in general, so yes, hunters will get it. Okay, you got away with this one, hunters. Fuck. So, ideally what you want to do is plan around this so you know which groups are going to get the spores in which order, okay? And healers, by the way, don't really desperately need the spores, like the debuff. So if you really want to avoid the healers, like eventually you get to the point where like you don't need as much healing as possible. And you will get to that point eventually at a certain level of gear and a certain level of optimization on this fight. You might want to consider just skipping a healer group and just going through 7 groups of DPSers, and just to make sure that you have 100% uptime on the spore, the spore debuff for all the DPS. And so as far as how you want to prioritize who gets the debuff spore first, there's a couple of lines of thought that you can take. Because you want to plan it in sets of 5, of course, because 5 people can get the debuff at a time. And whenever those 5 people are up, whenever it's their turn, you want to make sure that they run towards the spore that's spawned. And they all stack on top of the spore first, and then once the people are on top of the spore, then you kill it. If you're one of the assigned people that is supposed to kill the spores, like, let's watch me do it here. I kind of do this a bit faster than I should have, to be honest. Going back and watching this VOD. There it is. Okay, so you don't want to actually kill the spore until the 5 people in your group are actually sitting on top of it. Because if you kill the spore too early, it might be some other random ass people that get the spore debuff and not the assigned 5 people. And you don't want to just refresh it on somebody that already has it. So what you want to do ideally is you run to the spore like this, you wait for the rest of the group that's assigned to get it to get to you as well, stack up, and then you kill it. So like this is fine, like we all got the spore here. But you just want to make sure that like Lane, like he's not standing over here when you kill the spore, otherwise he won't get the benefit of the debuff, and it kind of defeats the purpose. Okay, so as long as you coordinate it with your specific group correctly and you kill it, you don't kill it too early, everyone gets the debuff, cool. And now it's called out like, okay, so group 1, I was in group 4 here, so I was the 4th group to get the spore. And now like, all right, group 5, you're next. Like next time the spore spawns, group 5, run and kill the spore. Okay, so how should you prioritize who gets the spore? There's 2 lines of thought you can take. What's the range of the spore pop? It's not huge, it's like 5 yards or so. So you basically want to be within melee range. The traditional line of thought as to who gets the spores first would be give it to mages first, because as a mage, getting the spore basically allows you to build the biggest, fattiest, thickest fucking ignite possible, and basically guarantee that you roll it the entire fight. Because with 60% crit, plus consumes, plus gear, and plus potentially world buffs, you're basically going to have 100% crit. This is like essentially spellcaster recklessness. And you do no threat, so you can roll an ignite forever without having to worry about it. As a mage on this fight, if you're a guild that chooses to prioritize mages getting it first, you want to gear around specifically building as big of an ignite as possible. So, for example, you're going to want to use Zandalarian Hero Charm, because that gives you the most plus spell power benefit. And if you're really a tryhard mage, you want to gear for nothing but hits and spell power. Like you want to ignore crit on your gear because you're going to be getting so much from this debuff. So like you can kind of build the equivalent of like a spellcaster rec set, because all you want to do is focus on maximizing the damage of those first 5 fire spells to build the ignite as fast as possible. So yes, what Kill Logic said, this is without question a fight where it can be beneficial to use Pyroblast as an ignite builder. There aren't many fights in the game where it makes sense, but this is definitely one of them. If you have all of your mages get the spore debuff and then all start hard casting a Pyroblast, you pop Combustion, of course, too, as well, even though it really doesn't matter, but you might as well. Then, ideally, you have those 5 Pyroblasts hit as hard as you possibly fucking can, like Priest can PI as well, if you've got a PI Priest. And then once that 5-stack Ignite is rolling, you just keep casting fire spells, you have close to 100% crit, and you can roll it the entire fight. I believe on Loatheb, my largest Ignite ever was about 6.5k, and I rolled a 6.5k for about 2 minutes straight. I think I did something like 4k DPS on Loatheb back on private servers. It was fucking nuts. It was so juicy. God, that was fun. So that is one strategy you can go with. The other one you can go with as far as distributing the Spore debuff, and frankly the one I think that makes more sense in 2020 with the meta that exists, is you just give all the the mega pumpers in the raid the Spore debuff first, right? Because like the people that like the top performers in your guild are gonna get the most benefit out of the debuff, right? Like if the top pumpers get it first, they're gonna be able to do the most damage for the longest period of time. So at that point, you'd want to prioritize warriors. Keep in mind, threat's not a problem, so it doesn't really make a difference who's going to be threat capped or not. That's a non-issue. So I personally, at this point of the meta, would probably say give it to warriors first. I don't necessarily agree that mages should get it first. Like, yeah, sure, the Ignite's going to roll for a juicy amount once you get it up, but is that going to make up for the lack of warrior pumpers, at least from getting the first Spore? I'll be honest, mathematically speaking, I'm not exactly sure of the correct choice over time. You can go with either, though, I can tell you that. There are some guilds that go with warrior pumpers first. There are some guilds that go with mage ignites first. Both are fine. Both will allow you to increase raid DPS by quite a bit. As to which one provides more overall raid DPS over time, like I said, I'm not sure. If anything, the longer a fight is, the more beneficial it is for mages to get first, like so they can start rolling the Ignite as soon as possible. Or sorry, not the longer, I meant the shorter the fight is, the more important it is for the Ignite to be rolled as long as possible. But that one I'll leave up to each individual guild. I'm not going to necessarily recommend one over the other. Okay, so I'll get to your guys' questions here in a sec. I see quite a few, and I'll get to them, I promise. As far as popping cooldowns in this fight, the only thing you don't want to do is make sure you don't fucking go ham at the start of this fight. Because keep in mind, once you get this debuff, you're not worried about threat. But you can absolutely rip off the tank before you get the debuff, because at the start of the fight, you don't have the fungal bloom debuff that's going to allow you to do no threat. So therefore, if your tank is especially wearing like a bit more mitigation-ish gear than normal, because he's trying to make sure he mitigates enough to the point where the healers don't have to heal too quickly, threat, especially for a lot of dad guilds and more casual guilds, it's going to be very touchy at the start of this fight. So the last thing you want to fucking do is pull aggro, because if you do and take a bunch of damage from Loatheb, like, it's not getting healed. If you take literally any auto attack from Loatheb and any damage from this fight before 2 minutes starts, you're probably fucked. So just be very careful at the start of this fight. As far as cooldown usage is concerned, it kind of depends on how long this fight is going to be. Realistically, can you do this fight in around 3 or 3-ish plus minutes? Yes, and if that's the case, or at least the top, like the pumper guilds will be able to do it that fast. If you can do it that fast, then it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to pop cooldowns at the start, because you're only gonna be able to use 3-minute cooldowns once at that point, and so you'd still want to save it till the end. Keep in mind, the Spore debuff, it lasts only 1.5 minutes, but you can refresh it. So eventually, if like you're a warrior and you get to near execute phase, you're still gonna have the fungal bloom debuff like after you refresh it for a second time. So you still want to save your cooldowns for just like any other fight as a warrior for the end of the fight. Mages want to pop them at the start, like right when you get the fungal bloom for the first time, because they want to maximize their ignite damage. And in theory, after that, it doesn't really matter. Like the only thing that really matters as a mage is you build as big of an ignite as possible initially. And then after that, you just make sure you refresh the fungal bloom so you can keep the ignite rolling. But warrior cooldowns, if the fight gets long enough, and this is going to depend based on what guild you're in, if the fight gets long enough, like when you get the first fungal bloom, you might be able to pop Death Wish and have it come up at the end of the fight again, maybe. You're just going to, as a warrior out there or any melee class, you're going to have to feel that out for yourself as to how long your specific fight length is. You're going to have to just figure out if you have time to pop Death Wish twice, or probably not AR twice, but like, you know, I don't know, Blade Flurry twice or something. As far as what trinkets you want to use in this fight as a warrior, once again, it sort of depends on your fight length. Like, eventually you can get this fight short enough where Diamond Flask might make sense, and I'll get to some Diamond Flask potential cheesing here in a second, but from a pure DPS perspective, Diamond Flask might make sense. Earth Strike will probably make the most sense, to be honest, just because you're going to be able to use it without question at least twice during this fight. For most guilds, probably 3 times. And so stacking Earth Strike with this Fungal Bloom is going to be enormous. Like, you don't want to wear Black Hand's Breath, obviously. And then as far as the rest of your gear is concerned, you want to maximize AP, basically. Like, have hit cap, of course. I'm talking about a warrior specifically. Have hit cap, like soft hit cap. But after that, just maximize AP. You don't need crit. You're going to be getting 50% from this. So you basically have like perma-rec already. So if you have a rec set and you somehow manage to have bag space for it, this is the fight to use it on, for sure. How much HP does he have? Loethab has 5 million HP, which sounds like a shit ton until you realize like the Fungal Bloom is a thing and you can crit your balls off. I'll get to the normal kill time for a guild in a bit. There's still one major mechanic we haven't touched on here, and it's the major mechanic that makes this fight hard. Because if this fight was just like, well, I don't know, you just like tank and spank it forever, then the healers can only heal every once in a while, but whatever, nobody takes damage. If nobody ever took damage on this fight besides the tank, then it'd be a joke, but we're gonna get to that. Are you opening with Death Wish? No, you don't want to open with Death Wish when you don't have Fungal Bloom yet and do a shit ton of thread and rip off the main tank. Alright, so. The reason why this fight's not a just complete, total joke, and it would be up to this point if there was no other mechanics that I hadn't mentioned yet, is eventually there's going to be an ability he casts on the entire raid called Inevitable Doom. So let's move up a little bit. Okay, here it is. He casts the first Inevitable Doom on the raid 2 minutes into the fight. So the first 2 minutes of the fight are essentially kind of free as far as you not taking damage are concerned. But 2 minutes into the fight, you're going to get that one right there. And the entire raid gets it. Guaranteed. There's no way to mitigate the Inevitable Doom. Petri Flask is not going to work. You can't somehow like ice block it as a mage. You can't like bubble it as a pally, I'm pretty sure even. When you get this debuff, you're guaranteed to get it, and it is guaranteed to expire and reach 0. When this debuff reaches 0, you're guaranteed to take an unresistible 2,550 shadow damage. And once the first Inevitable Doom goes off, is applied, it will reapply every 30 seconds for the entire rest of the fight. So, Loethab is through and through a DPS race because of this Inevitable Doom. Like, the name kind of implies what it's going to do. Inevitable Doom eventually will kill everybody, guaranteed. And so your goal as a DPS is kill Loethab before you reach your Inevitable Doom. So, remember how we talked about before the start of this fight that you wanted to pre-pop a GSPP? Well, this is why. Literally the only way to mitigate the damage of the Inevitable Doom is to have it be absorbed by a greater Shadow Protection Potion. It is not resistible, so resist gear is worthless. It cannot be partially resisted. You can't fully resist it. It can only be absorbed. That's it. The only other way, like little tip trick for you as a warrior, if you're truly concerned about how much damage you're going to take, you can swap the D-stance right before this debuff expires. And if you take Inevitable Doom in D-stance, you're going to take 10% less damage. And by that same logic, if you're in Zerker stance, you'll take 10% more. So I'll be honest, am I ever going to bother swapping out of Zerker stance for our specific Loethabs? No, fuck that. But if you're in a guild who cuts it a bit close on Loethab, not the worst idea to at least swap out of Zerker stance and maybe just go to D stance to at least mitigate the Inevitable Doom by a little bit. Warlocks can use Shadow Ward. Yes, that will also, anything that absorbs shadow damage will count. And yes, Power Word Shield counts as a heal, so nobody's getting Power Word Shielded. Can you use cheapo pots? No, you're going to want to use the good shit. I'm going to show you here in a second why that's necessary. But like I said, the Inevitable Doom, it gets applied every 30 seconds, periodically throughout the entire rest of the fight. So it gets applied at the 2-minute mark, the 2-minute 30 mark, the 3-minute mark, the 3.5-minute mark, 4-minute mark, so on and so forth. And so it requires a very specific order of consume usage to survive. Now, in reality, eventually you can get to the point, at least some guilds, Onslaught, Apes, Bakers, whatever, will get to the point where you can kind of brute force down this fight, and as long as you pre-pop a greater Shadow Protection Potion, or even pop one mid-fight, we'll nuke it down fast enough to the point we're not going to take enough damage from an Inevitable Doom to die in the first place. But traditionally speaking on this fight, and for, I would say, at least most guilds out there, they're going to have to follow this initially. You have to follow a very specific order of consume usage to maximize the amount of time you stay alive, and therefore to maximize the amount of time you can DPS before you die. Because it is a DPS race. If you take too long, everyone dies. Like what? Okay, if I didn't mention guild, oh, he means every guild he didn't mention sucks. Like whatever. Any top guild, progress, sure. Calamity, blah blah blah. Anyone like that. So, WoW, the Wowpedia says it best. I didn't create my own thing. I'm just gonna read off their thing. So basically, what you want to do is before the encounter starts, you free pop a Greater Shadow Protection Potion. 2 minutes and 10 seconds in, when the first Inevitable Doom actually goes off and does damage, you want to pop a new Greater Shadow Protection Potion, right? Because the first one gets used up. So you pop another one. And then the next one lands at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. At that point, you do nothing, because basically what's going to happen at this point is your potion's still on cooldown from drinking the one 30 seconds before. The Inevitable Doom goes off, the one you just drank eats it, and so you basically take no damage at that point. And then the one that goes off at 310, 30 seconds later, you're going to take 2550. At that point, you bandage. And you're going to be able to bandage up most of the health you lost. Not all of it, but bandage is 2,000 health restored, so you can bandage up most of it. 30 seconds after that, you will pop a health stone or a tuber. Now, ideally, if you're really trying to min-max this fight, like to make sure you give yourself the best possible chance to do it, you use a health stone. Eventually, you can get to the point where you just pop a tuber and whatever, like you'll be good. But if you're struggling on Loatheb initially, as much as it sucks, it's not the worst idea to have all of your warlocks make a health stone for literally everybody, because health stone does restore like significantly more health compared to tuber. Keep in mind, for those that already forgot, the reason you need all the shit is healers have a 1 minute cooldown on all of their heal spells. So they can only heal the main tank. They cannot heal you. They only have one heal spell a minute, and they have to put that on the main tank, otherwise he dies. So, ideally, make sure you get a major health stone here. At the very least, if your warlocks don't have enough shards or something, give the major health stones to the casters, because they have less HP overall. The melee are going to be able to take more dooms than the casters will, just because they have a higher HP pool. Healing Stream, I'll be honest, I'm not sure if it works or not. I didn't check to see if it works, if it goes on cooldown at the PTR. To be honest, Healing Stream's so negligible anyways. It barely does any healing to the point where it's not going to make a noticeable difference anyways. It does work. All right, there you go. I'll answer your question about like the Dark Moon cards and all that shit here in a second, but let me just finish off talking about the consume order. Okay, so you're going to use at 4 minutes and 10 seconds into the fight. If you still haven't killed Loatheb at this point, like, if you can kill Loatheb within this range of time, right here, 340 or beforehand, you're not really in danger of dying. Eventually, most guilds who have Naxx on farm will kill it at this point or a little bit before, to the point where Loatheb is not a scary fight, especially if you have world buffs. The fight starts to get scary after this point right here. If you go beyond 4 minutes, people are probably going to start dying, especially like the people really low in health. Like, the lower amount of health you have for this fight, the more rough it's going to get for you specifically. So, at 4 minutes and 10 seconds, you can pop a new GSPP, and then you're also going to bandage as well, because you've taken enough damage to the point where, like in this fight, you want to be able to absorb the next one, but you also need to top yourself up. And then the next one goes off, it gets absorbed by the GSPP. The next one at 5 minutes and 10 seconds goes off, you can bandage up one more time. If you still haven't killed Loatheb within 5 minutes, at that point, the Inevitable Doom, instead of going off every 30 seconds, will start going off every 15 seconds. So this essentially is an enrage on Loatheb. You basically have to kill Loatheb within 5 minutes, otherwise you're gonna die. Like, once you're at this point, like, if you're not dead already, you're very quickly gonna die after this. So, yeah, 44 minutes is 21k raid DPS. Like, even without the Loatheb buff, frankly, top guilds can still reach that number anyways, to the point where, unless you're like the shittiest of casual guilds right now and you have no idea how to properly press your DPS buttons, any halfway decent guild realistically will never get to this portion. You're going to kill it in this-ish amount of time right here, and so you'll be fine. I know I'm making this sound scary. I'm talking more about a traditional Loatheb. I'm going to talk about how, in reality, this fight is going to go here in a second, but also, I find it hilarious here that this little tip here on the Wowpedia says, light wells are not afflicted by the cooldown, so your priest can use their light wells. Alright, make sure your priest specking a light well for this fight. Well, don't do that. Please don't. Okay, so. I am 99% certain DBM is going to have, in fact, I'm pretty sure I saw it when I was doing the PTR, that it's going to tell you basically, it's going to make this brain dead easy. DBM will tell you which consume to use at which portion of the fight. It's going to be the giant thing that flashes on your screen like, all right, GSPP now, or bandage now, or health stone now, blah, blah, blah. So DBM will just tell you when to do it, or you can get like a weak aura that tells you when to do it. So as long as you know how to follow on-screen instructions, following the consume usage of this fight is not hard. Now, in a world where this fight is actually difficult, and it might be for the worst guilds out there, like I said, this will probably be what it looks like when you kill Loetheb for the first time. You're gonna be fighting against time. He's super low in health. You've got Inevitable Doom that goes off onto the raid. You're like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. You just barely kill him as like the entire raid dies. This is my first Loetheb kill on private servers right here. Keep in mind, this was a buffed version of Naxx right here, so this was A, worse guild that I was in, and B, a far harder version of Loetheb than what will exist on Classic. But this is kind of what the fight was designed to look at. Like, you kill Loetheb as the entire raid dies. Oh yeah, that flask coming right there, clutch. What did Dali look like back then? I was wearing like 2.5 in this set. You can see I'm wearing like Mish up here, 2.5 shoulders. Wow. So, in reality, will Loetheb actually be as hard as I just made it sound? No. With 2020 raid DPS, and especially with world buffs, I'm not going to say this fight's going to be a joke, because it's going to take your healers a while to get used to the cadence of healing, and it might take a couple of attempts for your DPS not to be brain dead and know when to go get their spore. And it might take people a couple of times maybe to like not fuck up their consume usage. Like you can see like Big Wigs here was showing me when to drink the GSPP. But yeah, a DPS check designed in 2005 is not very hard in 2020. So the DPS requirement's not hard. It's really the only thing that's going to be difficult about this fight is going to be the healers not fucking up and healing too quickly. Like as a healer, you're going to have to be a little bit patient. Like don't, when the main tank gets down to 80% health, it's not time to already pop your heal. Like you want to wait until probably here and then you heal. Unless your DPS literally have no idea how to play this game and they have no arms and therefore they have to mash their face on the keyboard, the DPS check for this fight is going to be a hilarious joke, especially, like I said, if you have buffs. So, I would still say it's going to be pretty necessary for most guilds to still bring, bare minimum, 2 GSPPs per attempt on Loetheb. Even like the top guilds in the world will still need to use 1. Whether you pre-pop it or whether you use it in the middle of a fight, for like the top guilds won't really matter. But for a more average guild, just like your 50th percentile guild, you will absolutely still want to bring 2 of them. Because while you can mitigate enough damage and heal up enough damage yourself to not realistically die in the time that it's going to take you to kill Loetheb, which is about this long for most guilds, like an average guild. If you don't have either of these, you're going to eat about 5k by this point. By this point, like you can bandage up, or you're going to eat 7.5k. By this point, you're going to eat 10k. And so by the time Loetheb dies in like an average amount of time, you're going to take about 12.5k damage. If you don't have GSPPs to absorb some of that, like most people will die, like unless you're rocking like the maximum fucking beefy boy set and you have like 10k health or 11k health as a warrior. Even in the amount of time that most guilds, like an average guild, will take to kill Loetheb, you will still take enough damage to the point where if you come completely unprepared with no GSPPs, you will still die. So make sure you bring your GSPPs. As long as you bring these, this fight will be a joke. For most guilds. As long as the healers know what they're doing. Which will take them a while to get used to, admittedly. But as long as the healers know what they're doing, as a DPS, you just brainlessly press your GSPP twice, and you're good. So people were talking about like the Dark Moon card heroism, and oh, I gotta use Judgment of Light, and oh, I gotta bring a bunch of self-healing shit. Like, maybe the worst of guilds might want to utilize that, but like to be honest, you can just rock your full regular DPS set. So like, and like Drast was talking about a Diamond Flask set earlier. The tank can use it. The tank will absolutely want to use it at the start of the fight. But the problem with using a Diamond Flask healing set as a DPS warrior is, like I said, the first Inevitable Doom doesn't go out until 2 minutes and 10 seconds into the fight. So if you start the fight with your Diamond Flask healing set, or if you pre-pop your Diamond Flask before the fight starts with your healing set and then the fight starts, by the time your Diamond Flask fades, you will have taken a grand total of 0 damage. Diamond Flask healing set ain't gonna do shit for the first 2 minutes of the fight because you're not taking damage anyways. What you can do if you really want to is right before the first inevitable doom goes out, if you had Diamond Flask equipped when the fight started, you could swap to healing weapons, because you can still swap your weapons in combat. You can swap your weapons in combat to healing stuff and then pop your Diamond Flask. So like if you have high Warlord weapons, for example, you would have 100, 280, like 390 plus healing. Do you actually need that to survive low with them? Probably not, but like if you're really cutting it close and if you really want to try hard it, you could, I guess, swap your weapons for like a mini Diamond Flask healing set. In reality, would I recommend you actually do that though? Is it going to be necessary for most guilds? Nah. The problem is if a fight's like 4 minutes long, you don't want to use Diamond Flask for a fight length that duration. You want to probably use Earth Strike or maybe just 2 statics. So yeah, 390 is almost 4k healing over the course of the flask duration. I'm just saying that for most guilds, like any halfway decent guild, you're not going to take enough damage to the point where you're going to need that Diamond Flask healing anyways. So as long as you don't die in this fight, like you're not in danger of being bursted down as a DPS, unless you really fuck up and pull threat somehow. At no point during this fight are you ever going to like, not being topped up is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're sitting at 50% health and Lotheb's about to die, oh god, I hope Diamond Flask heals me up. I need to get back to full health. Like, no, you don't. Like, you're fine. So, I'd recommend just using like full-on DPS gear for this fight. You realistically, if you're in a halfway decent guild, aren't going to need anything special besides GSPPs and like a bandage. That's about it. And Shamans, just make sure they draw Poison Cleansing Totem to mitigate the poison. Alliance, you're not going to have Poison Cleansing, but frankly, if you do use Judgment of Light, once again, I don't even think it's necessary, but if you do, plus like you've got, as your warrior, you have Crusader procs, you have Bloodthirst healing, that's going to be enough to top you up anyways. The poison, I mentioned at the start of this fight, it's a 12-second debuff, it only ticks every 6 seconds, so it only hits you 3 times, and it only hits you for 196 damage. That is very easily healable by just Crusader and Bloodthirst, if anything. Major Troll's Blood, don't even bother. No. I mean, unless you're in like an Ultra Dad guild that's struggling and just barely reaching the DPS requirement, then maybe at that point, sure, maximizing your survivability is not the worst idea. But I'm just saying for your average guild with even just like an average meh amount of raid DPS in 2020, you're not gonna have a problem here. It's just a healer fight at that point. Should tanks still prio Stone Shield over GSPP? Ideally, yes, I believe. I don't know that for certain. Maybe there's a tank in here that knows better than I do, but yes, I'm fairly certain the tank does in fact use a Stone Shield. So, you do that, the healers aren't brain dead, and you can kill Lotheb. That's really all there is to it. What do Warlocks do without life tap? Ooh, that is something I should mention as a caster. Hold on, one sec. Oh, that is, okay, here's one thing I did forget to mention too. There's 2 more things I want to mention. Okay. As a DPS, like most DPS are going to be fucking thirsty to get that spore as soon as it spawns. So like killing the spore within the amount of time that you have to kill it isn't realistically going to be a problem. But keep in mind, if the spore, if you ignore the spore, it's going to move towards the boss when it spawns. If you just completely ignore the spore, like we kind of do in this VOD right here, you don't want it to actually reach the boss. If the spore reaches the boss, it will hit the tank, and the tank will get the debuff where he generates no threat. So like if it happens at the very end of the fight, frankly, it doesn't really matter. But the last thing you want to have happen is your tank getting the debuff, because the tank obviously wants to do threat, like he doesn't want a debuff that gives him no threat. So just make sure as a DPS, like unleash your inner gorilla, make sure you kill the spore before this point. Like, and you will. I doubt anybody's gonna have this problem. I hope not. And then as a caster, as a mage specifically, and like even as a warlock, because you're not really gonna be able to tap, mana is gonna be a problem this fight. Because number one, as a mage, like you're gonna be using your potion cooldown for a GSPP, and therefore can't use it for major mana. And it's a long-ish fight to the point where like eventually you'll go hard So it's not the worst idea to like, once you get the juicy ignite rolling, just spam Scorch. Number one, because Scorch will have a better chance to make sure ignite stays up. And number two, because Scorch is more mana efficient. So this is going to be kill time dependent, but for a lot of mages, at least initially, you might have mana issues on this fight. You can evocate once, of course, use your mana gems. Well, actually, no, you don't want to use... Alright, yeah, okay, so... Because you want to use a health stone at some point during this fight as a mage, the only time to use a mana gem would be the very, very start of the fight. Because by the time you're 2.5, or well, I guess 3 minutes into the fight, you're going to want to have your health stone cooldown up. And because mana gem shares a cooldown with health stone, just use your mana gem at the start. Yeah, Warlock's running like 5 of 5, 2.5. Not the worst idea as well. So just, I guess what I'm saying is make sure you manage your mana properly. As a mage as well, your mage team is probably going to want to coordinate who is still continuing to cast spells while other mages bandage. Because at some point during the fight, most guilds will still at least initially be at the point where you're going to have to bandage. And so if the bandage phase starts and every mage starts bandaging, then your ignite's going to drop. So usually what you're going to want to do as a mage team is have, when the bandage becomes necessary, like as a mage, you're going to have like 2 mages continuing to spam Scorch while the rest of the mages bandage up. And then once those mages bandage up, then those other 2 mages that were spamming Scorch can then bandage themselves. So like you never want all the mages to stop casting at once, because as a mage, you never want your initial juicy ignite to drop. Otherwise, building that juicy ignite at the start is pointless if it drops at some point. So be careful as a mage team. Make sure you have a mage constantly casting at all times during this fight. The bandage phase is really the only part where that might not happen, so just keep that part in mind. As a healer, you can DPS on this fight. Just don't use so much mana as a healer that you don't have enough mana for your fat, juicy heal. But besides that, like, you don't really want to melee because you don't want to take poison damage, though you can probably get away with it, to be honest. But like, healers can dump at least a little bit mana into damage because they're only healing once a minute anyways. Bandage does not count for the healing debuff. Even if it did, doesn't matter because the bandage debuff is a minute long anyways. But otherwise, as a healer, yeah, you can dump some mana into DPSing if you want to. And was that it? Was there one more thing I was going to mention, or was that it? Mana management, the spores. Yeah, no, that was it. All right. So there you go. And that's the Plague Wing. You kill Lilitheb. Once you kill Lilitheb, just like in any other wing of Naxx, what you're going to do is like this little portal thingamajigger is going to show up on the floor. This happens at the end of every wing. And what you can do is you go to this portal, you right click it, and then boom, you're back at the start and you're free to do whatever wing you want to do next. So there you go. I think the question is whether a healer can both use a healing spell and a bandage on themselves. Yeah, they can. Bandage is not on the cooldown restriction. So yeah, 8 of 8 tier 2 for Priest, definitely super juicy for that fight. Any sort of burst healing mechanic that you have as a healer is what you want to use. Like to just maximize the effectiveness of one single heal. So like Scarab Brooch, super OP. Just on-use trinkets in general, super OP. Tonic says, so no mage has to stop casting ever? What? Oh, healers can run around and bandage the mages. Yeah, I never thought about that, but yeah, you could do that for sure. That'd be smart. So yeah, if you want to just have your mages constantly spamming Scorch without ever stopping, just healers use their free time anyways to just bandage the mages after they're done bandaging themselves. Yeah, reasonable. Wish my guild was smart enough to do that back when I did this as a mage. Are we getting the version where Vampiric Embrace doesn't work and he dispels it? Vampiric Embrace should work. The thing about running Vampiric Embrace that makes it, in my opinion, not really something that you should focus on using is Vampiric Embrace only affects your party, right? So unless you're running a Shadow Priest in every single party, like, it doesn't really matter if one Shadow Priest is keeping one group alive. If like every single other group dies, you're still fucked. So, especially with how easy this fight will honestly be, like, is it necessary to bring a Shadow Priest? No. You'll have one for the lock group, sure. Like, maybe, but is it specifically needed to keep the raid alive? Nah. There's a note in the wiki that says Vampiric Embrace was patched not to work. I'm not sure. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But regardless, like, it doesn't matter, to be honest. It's not even worth mentioning because it, in reality, won't matter anyways. Can you take the Lilitheb buff to Patchwork if you're fast enough? Well, okay, the Lilitheb, I mean, somebody asked earlier, does the Lilitheb buff stay on you after the Lilitheb's dead? Yes, it does. But keep in mind, not only do you keep the Fungal Spore after Lilitheb dies, you will also keep the healing cooldown after Lilitheb dies. Like, the Loatheb constantly refreshes the debuff on the healers that gives them a 1 minute cooldown on heals. So realistically, you can't do anything for a minute after Loatheb dies, because your healers can't heal. So can you go to Patchwork immediately after Loatheb? You can engage him with the fungal spore buff, sure, but it might be difficult to keep your tanks alive, like especially your hateful soakers, if your healers can only cast a heal once a minute. Wouldn't recommend it. I'll log out for Loatheb. No, it's a debuff though, so it's gonna tick off. Oh no, I guess no, it'd stay around technically. And no, this was tested. You cannot Petri off the Loatheb debuff. You cannot Petri off the fungal bloom. You cannot Petri off the corrupted mind. It is unremovable. The only thing that removes it is dying. So I guess if you want to have the entire raid suicide, sure, then you can get rid of the Loatheb healing debuff. So there you go. That's the Plague Wing.